Okay, let me check and see what's going on here. Yeah, it says we're starting. Good deal. Okay. Hello, good evening, and welcome to From the Grassy Knoll, a production of Republic News with your hostess, Liviana. I am your hostess, Liviana, and with me I have three guests this evening, DDR Mog, Fort Blastington, and Union Aerospace. If you guys would like to introduce yourselves, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ryan. My screen title is Lord Blasting, and my Twitter handle is @Lord Blastington.
Well, hello, my name is Union Aerospace, student in University of Madrid, World War II geek, and as a daily recommendation for World War II games for you in mind, try Brothers in Arms. It's a really good game.
Hi, I'm DDR Mog. My alias is normally known as Ulysses. I'm the token Marxist of their server, and I am associated with several different online communities, including Something Awful Forums and Goonswarm Federation on Evil Online.
Did you just say Goonswarm Federation?
Yes.
Oh. Oh no. Alright.
Oh.
So,
The
welcome.
Goonswarm?
Yeah. So welcome to From the Grassy Knoll, a production of Republic News with your hostess Liviana, and I am your hostess Liviana. So tonight we don't have a topic as usual, and we will proceed to talk about whatever comes to mind or anything maybe might be suggested by people in the live chat. We do have a few people watching now. Hello to all of you all, and welcome. Yeah, there will be a little bit of echo because I have to keep turning off my mic when I'm not talking, or else I get feedback from other people talking in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hey, hi, Silver Fox.
The stream appears to have gone offline.
Really?
Yeah, it says I cannot for some reason I cannot send messages in the side chat.
It's buffering.
Oh, there we go again. Well then.
Ooh, we have to reintroduce ourselves when it's fixed. So, Liv, what's wrong with Goonswarm Federation?
Connection is fine, so I don't, it may be YouTube doing their thing again. Seems like Friday nights are pretty busy for them. A couple of weeks ago, we had a little bit of a glitch at the start, and then after the first little bit, it cleared up and we were able to do just fine. So expect there will be some buffering, and there's not really anything I can do about that from here, unfortunately.
Well, who starts topic? Should I start a topic?
I think the biggest news right now is the Korean Peace Summit in Singapore.
Oh yeah, I think I've heard about that one. Is that like the meeting up with the? What are they going to do exactly?
They're going to discuss denuclearization of North Korea, as usual, but they're also going to discuss a peace treaty between South Korea and North Korea, as well as increasing trade links and normalizing relations between the two states.
Denuclearization of North Korea. Fat chance. They have the A-bomb. They're not going to let go of it.
No, of course not. It's against why North Korea has literally no reason to give up the nuclear weapon either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the nuclear weapon is actually the only thing that the North Koreans can use to bargain with.
Well, it's because it's the only way they can threaten the United States.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
That's
is
why.
definitely a bargaining chip, basically. I mean, the whole thing is, if they get rid of it, then someone's going to roll over them, or at least that's what they think. And there is some evidence from the past to suggest that. But whether or not that would happen is anybody's guess.
At this point, I don't think anyone would even be interested in dealing with the North once and for all.
I don't know, actually. The North is actually the site of trillions of dollars worth of natural resources.
Are they now?
They are.
I need
Really?
to update my sources then.
Yeah, because like I kind of like when people think about North Korea, they usually think about like this like impoverished shithole, like that the only thing they really have is nuclear weapons. Like,
They do put all the resources into that, but North Korea is a very complex state and has a very complex history. It was in terms of economic prowess, it was on par with the South for about 30 years until the collapse of the USSR. The USSR was basically propping North Korea as a viable state on its own. But
I see.
the reason why North Korea can't basically utilize those trillions of dollars worth of resources or sell them or anything like that is because a lot of people think mining is still sending a bunch of workers up a mine shaft and then hacking at a wall with a mine pick. Modern day engineering is required for any form of modern mining operation, especially of minerals in shafts like lithium, which is the kind of resources that North Korea has. That requires top-of-the-line engineers, which there are only a few hundred of on the planet. North Korea has no way of getting access to these engineers or the tools that they produce to be able to perform the mining operations. So the literal trillions of dollars worth of wealth that sits in North Korea is just going to sit there until they either collapse or open up.
I see, like.
Damn. Yeah, go on.
No, that's basically just saying.
Oh.
I can't remember the exact sources on that, but there is a huge amount of resources in North Korea. The general global stance is, quote unquote, it's not trustworthy enough to have money for those resources, but in reality, it's a geopolitical power play. It's under a huge amount of sanctions, so any country that would actually be willing to do a deal with North Korea with that is not willing to deal with the wrath of the United States.
Yeah, there is definitely a vast amount of minerals under minerals is what we've been told more recently. Vast amount of minerals under North Korea, and that's the reason for a lot of the more recent drama, if you will.
Paranoia?
Oh, I said drama.
Maybe could we call that paranoia?
Geopolitical power play is a much better term, because that's what it is ultimately in the day.
Well, it's a lot like, you know, these, I don't know, if you go watch these shows like WWE, or whatever it's called now, I don't know, I think they've changed the name several times, World Wrestling Federation and World Wrestling Entertainment, I don't know what, but it's, you know, these matches are staged. But before they actually get into the ring, you've got some guy that stands up with the announcer and starts doing a lot of posturing and shit-talking of the person he's about to fight, right? And then the other person will come out and do likewise. Sometimes the other person comes out and beats him with a chair, or, you know, this kind of shit. It's just a big drama thing. It's an act, really. And this is a lot of what goes on in modern-day politics. You have a lot of posturing and a lot of rhetoric and people, you know, trying to intimidate other people through the force of their personalities more than anything else.
Yeah, that's true. I gotta ask a thing. There's not much information going on about North Korea, but what's the current state of its military? Are they still using T-34s?
Are you asking me? Because
Yeah.
I don't know if they're still using T-34s. I know
Yeah.
their military is still heavily antiquated, and that's one of the main reasons why they want nuclear weapons, because they have no means of advancing their military. They don't have the Soviet Union to back them, and China only really keeps them around as a buffer state.
Yeah, I
Don't
don't
piss
know
off the Chinese
anything
Politburo at
about.
this point.
I don't know anything about the North Korean military capability, except that they have some missiles and at least one nuke, right?
Yeah, well, we all know that the capacity of the military of North Korea is that it can draft a lot of people from it. I'm not sure how much the numbers are. 4 million plus reservists?
North Korea is set up like a pre-war state,
Yeah.
as in like basically back in Europe, it used to be common to have an army. Say again?
We are having an actual issue at the moment. Apparently, YouTube is still doing their dumb shit because it just told me the stream is complete, and it obviously is not. But now it says we're live again, and I did nothing. The connection is 4G at the moment. I'm not losing any. I mean, I'm not. My connection is fine. I mean, it's probably not the best. Obviously, it's probably 2 or 3 bars, but I don't know what's going on really. So.
Boss, where? If you don't mind me asking, where do you live in the United States?
I live in what I call the mini skirts of nowhere, which is a little more than midway up the thigh. I mean, it's about halfway between the middle of nowhere and the edge of nowhere. So.
Okay. But that is like which do you have the Discord server set to the optimal region for this?
Yes. It's not the Discord server, honestly. It's the I've been having some issues with my ISP, and there has also been something going on with YouTube. I thought they would have had it resolved by now, but obviously that's not the case. I mean, the week before last, it wasn't just me. There was someone in the live chat who was hopping around between various people live streaming, and everyone was having the same issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the live stream seems to be cutting between the state of being active and not.
Yeah.
Maybe they know you're a Russian alt troll bot and they're trying to sabotage you.
It could also be your connection. Your voice seems to go a little bit robotic sometimes, like on the Discord server itself as well, which would imply a bandwidth issue. And if you say you live in the middle of nowhere in the United States, which is pretty notorious for its terrible rural internet, terrible internet in general actually, but terrible rural internet, yeah, that might actually be a big part of it.
Well, it hasn't been a problem for the past 6 years. That's the point I've tried to make to the ISP. I mean, I've been more or less in the same spot. I've moved a couple of times since I first hooked up with them. But basically the same area. I am within sight of their tower. There's nothing between here and there. I can see it from the front porch if I take out binoculars. You know, I mean, it's just binoculars, too. It's not like I have to use a telescope or something like that. And there's nothing between there and here, so I should be getting a clear signal, and I have been for the past 6 years. I didn't start having any issues with live streaming until about maybe 2.5 months ago, and that was around the time Ajit Pai got up with the FCC. I watched this, so I mean, I got to see his shit-eating grin as he and his 3 cohorts voted against the other 2 people on the commission and said no more net neutrality. And so like almost immediately after that is when all this shit started. Now I know that the no more net neutrality didn't take effect until like a couple of days ago, but I think they thought, well, yeah, we can go ahead and start screwing with people now. And I know for a fact that they're screwing with me on one end because I have a Wi-Fi like modem whatever thingy or not modem, a router, receiver, and whatever. And the reason I first called them about this a month and a half ago or so was because I had begun to drop down to 3G and sometimes 1G and sometimes lose connection entirely. And it had never been an issue before, and suddenly it was. And so they started telling me that I'm in a marginal coverage area, and I said, since when? Because I've been here for 6 years, and I haven't had this trouble before. So what's the deal? You know, and after several back and forth conversations with them, I finally started getting 4G consistently on the router. It even tells me how much data I've used and how much time it is till the next cycle begins, which it shouldn't be doing if I'm not actually getting a connection. But it does, and it gives me this 4G LTE with 2 or 3 bars consistently, and tells me consistently how much data I've used and how long it is till the next cycle. Whereas, you know, before it was dropping down to 3G and 1G and no connection at all. No, it doesn't do that anymore, but I never get any arrow up or arrow down next to the LGE indicator on the thing, which means that I'm not able to upload or download anything, and it will not connect to my computer. This was after our last conversation. It's kind of like they said, basically, fuck you, and I said, no, fuck you. I mean, there was no such language used in the conversation, but basically that's what happened. So I think that, I think that they are fucking with me, trying to drive their point home that they're the mighty ISP company and I'm just a little nobody. And I'm like, dude, I'm paying you over $500 a month. You ought to be kissing my ass.
I hope it's that. I hope it's really that.
You're paying $500 a month?
Really?
Holy shit.
Yeah, it's fucking insane. And this is what they do.
Is there...
No, there's no other option. It's that the reason it's so fucking expensive is because they have a monopoly in the area. The only other option I have would be satellite internet, and I'm not even sure they still offer that here. But even if they did, you know, the wind blows a little bit, and a tree between here and the satellite means that I start, you know, seeing pixelated images on the television screen. It would not be something that would be satisfactory for a gamer such as myself or a person who does live streams either. And furthermore, it's unlimited unlimited data, but only from like 1 in the morning till like 8 in the morning or something like that. So I'd get like 7 hours of unlimited data, and the rest of the time I get 1 gigabyte a day, and if I go over that I get overage charges, and you know, it would wind up being at least $500 a month that way too. So yeah, that's not really an option for me.
Why do you live in the United States again?
Why do I live in the United States?
Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure the internet is a very important part of your life. In fact, personally for me, it quite literally is a deciding factor of whether or not I move somewhere, is how good is this internet.
Well, I mean, where do you want me to go? Japan or South Korea? They have the best internet in the world, supposedly. I don't particularly want to go there.
You could come to your homeland.
Oh, you mean Ireland?
We have some of the best internet in the world.
No, I don't think so. You know, I don't want to be part of the EU. I have my firearms and I'm not giving them up. You know, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, if you care about, if you want your guns, you can go to the Czech Republic and have full self-defense rights with firearms there.
Don't give up your memes either.
Yeah, I'm not just, see, I don't want to, there's no reason for me to have to surrender my right to defend myself. And, I don't speak Czech, right? I don't speak Slovak, I don't speak, any of these languages. I speak a little Spanish, I speak a little Italian, I speak a little German, I speak a little Gallic. I can read and write Latin, but that's not going to do much for me in a foreign country. I can read and write a little bit of classical and New Testament Greek. I can read and write a little bit of biblical Hebrew. And I can make out enough ancient Aramaic to be able to pull out a lexicon and look stuff up.
And fluent in Old Irish.
You could maybe like move to like Canada, like.
I mean, yeah, there's Old Irish too, but that's not a living language. When I say Old Irish, I mean something that was spoken like in 500 AD.
Oh, that's old.
That's way old.
Well, that's really old. Yeah.
That's why I capitalized the O in old, because it is a specific language. It's not like Irish that was spoken 100 years ago. It's Irish that was spoken 1,500 years ago. It's the ancestor to Middle Irish, which then eventually became Early Modern Irish, and that, you know, you had your orthographic reconfiguration about 100 years ago or so. So whatever you got now, I don't really know what to call. It's still Modern Irish, but it's like not Early Modern. I mean, when Early Modern Irish would be something around the 1600s, probably 1700s. But yeah, when I say Old Irish, I mean an ancestor language of what you speak now. The language that, you know, the Woordgebal Ern is written in, metrical Hengas and all that stuff. That's the language. And I certainly don't speak that.
You see?
I don't think anyone alive speaks that, but there are scholars who, David Stifter, for example, University of Vienna, Dennis King up in Washington, I believe. Yeah, I think he's around Seattle. There are a few other people. There was, of course, Alexei Kondratiev, who was at City University of New York, but he passed away a few years ago. And there are other people as well, but I'm not one of those scholars. I'm just a student of the language.
Fair enough. Though, I have to ask, if it's Old Irish, like if it's super ancient Irish, how far back is it? Do you say Piask or Isk? For fish.
Pesh. The thing, let's see, how far back it is. I mean, there's a period of the language where it goes through a syncopation phase, and let's see, I guess it would be, I'm not really sure the dates on it. I know that a lot of the stuff that I look at comes from around 8500 and later. Let me see if I can find a date, or dates rather. Yeah, let me just look this up here real quick and see. Old Irish, it was used from about AD 600 to about AD 900, according to Wikipedia. And then it says an early form of it was Primitive Irish, but that wasn't an early form of Old Irish. It was a language which preceded Old Irish. Primitive Irish is the language that, you know, all the Ogham carvings that you have in Ireland, those are inscribed in Primitive Irish.
Yeah, but I actually asked you a question for Irish, because there's a point in Irish where Irish becomes a Q insular language, or the Q insular language, and that's when we drop our P's. I asked you, do you say Isk or Piask for fish? Oh, so yeah, you're pre losing the P. That's very old. Well, yeah. I'm just going, before you continue doing that, Liv, is anybody else okay with this being the topic? Because it's super specific, basically, to anybody who's either Irish, of ethnicity, descendants, or interested in language. And then I'm pretty sure that the other two individuals here are not Irish by any relation.
See, all this shit I was saying didn't come through on the stream because I didn't have my mic turned on. Great.
Nice.
Yep.
So it's just me talking to myself then the whole time.
Apparently so.
Hey, Silver Fox, do I sound like a schizophrenic?
You sound too smooth to be schizophrenic.
Smooth?
Yeah, like I could listen to you and actually be chill because of your voice.
Yeah, you do kind of have that kind of voice, yeah.
Okay.
Awfully nice, dude. Which brings me to the question. DDR, do you play games?
I do indeed play video.
You do. Have you seen the E3?
Nope, I don't bother with that anymore.
I've bothered to try to watch it with some friends. Cause I'm a fucking masochist, you know.
You just tell me more about that.
You didn't miss anything. It was a fucking shit show.
Exactly why I stopped watching it.
I think it was worse than the last year's E3.
I stopped watching it after it became a viable drinking game to take shots to TV. TV.
According to the Dictionary of the Irish Language, this by the Royal Irish Academy, which deals with Old Irish and Middle Irish, mostly Old Irish, it says isk.
Oh, I see. Didn't know
Okay,
that.
so that's post.
So it's an I with a fada, an A, and an S, and a C.
Yes, that's okay. So that's post. That's when it became a Q Celtic Insular language.
Well, I mean, it was a Q Celtic language already as far back as Primitive Irish, because you have the example of let me see. There's MAQQ is a word that you find repeated several times in the inscriptions, which was an earlier form of what you know now as MAC, the word that means sun. So back in Primitive Irish, it was moon. What was it? Isle and Quert. Yeah, that was it. Those were the names of those particular characters. Muin or Muin, Ilv, and Quert, which are all names of what it says are trees. But I mean, Muin means like grapevine, so it's obviously not a tree. Some of the names of these characters are actually names of shrubberies or things of that nature. So Quert would be an apple tree, and Elf is an elm, I believe, an elm. But yeah, so I mean, as early as Primitive Irish, which is earlier than the Old Irish I've studied, it was already a Q Celtic language. Now, it depends on, to be perfectly honest, the scholars will say that the Q Celtic form is the older form of the language, that the P Celtic language was an innovation. So you'd have, Gallo-Britannic, which, gives us then the Brythonic Celtic languages of today, which are P-Celtic languages, would be an innovation over, say, Celtiberian and Primitive Irish, and Proto-Celtic would have been a Q-Celtic language. I am also, of course, familiar with T.F. O'Reilly's massive early Irish history and mythology, in which he talks about the Gweedles having come in late to Ireland, that they were the last invaders or settlers or whatever to come into Ireland and brought with them the Q-Celtic language, which the other three groups of people there supposedly were P-Celtic speakers, beginning with the Pretani, then moving to the Erin, then to the Lion, and finally the Gweedle, who came in with the Q-Celtic language. But unfortunately, we have progressed beyond what was known at the time, and there was no actual series of invasions, regardless of what the Lebor Gabala Erin says. There was not the Book of the Taking of Ireland. There was no taking of Ireland. The people of Ireland today are genetically primarily of the same stock as the pre-Indo-European people who lived in Europe. So I call them Aboriginal Europeans. They're not the original Europeans who were so like Neolithic and people that came in during the last Ice Age, but they are people who came in towards the end of the Stone Age. So it would be Neolithic settlers, and they interbred with, you know, the people who had been there before. So there is that. But as far as Indo-European or Caucasian genetics, no. There's not much there. I mean, there's obviously some, because there's no such thing as pure genetic heritage anywhere in the world, unless you're talking about some isolated tribe in the backwaters of the Amazon, or someone maybe in Kamchatka or Irkutsk or somewhere like that, you know, one Siberian tribe somewhere out in the middle of fucking nowhere. But yeah, even they would have some kind of admixture. It might be much less than anywhere else. But yeah, and certainly, you know, you've had the Roman invasion of Britannia, which brought Indo-Europeans from the Italic group of Indo-Europeans. You have had the Anglo-Saxons, Frisians, and Utes who came into that area later, who brought with them the Germanic DNA, and you have the Norse and the Danes who were raiding and sometimes settling in Scotland and England and Ireland and the Isles between. After that, who brought in more Germanic. You got the Normans who came in later and brought their genes as well, which is, you know, this Norsemen basically again. And so, I mean, there have been other people who've come in more recently as a result of British colonialism. So, I mean, there is that influence. But if you go into the Gaeltacht of Ireland, or down into Munster, or over into Connacht, if you go into the Gaeltacht in Scotland, say Argyll or West Highlands, and the Hebrides, you're going to find more of the quote original unquote genetic material among the people than you would elsewhere. Now the Hebrides is a little bit different, because there was a lot of what has been called Hebridean Vikings. So you had a lot of people who came in there from Norway, and some of them settled. And one of my ancestors, Somerled, of course, has been called a Celtic Viking, because he was descended from both people in Ireland and people from Norway. And so you have a lot of... Huh?
There's a name for this. It's called the Norse Gaels.
Right. Inchigail is the name of those isles as well. It means the islands of the strangers, basically. But the idea that they were completely settled by the Norse is not correct. They were people who settled there, obviously, but the people of Dalriada had been settling western Scotland and the Isles for 10 generations before the three sons of Eric settled among their people in about AD 500, at least according to the Shenchus Fern Alban. And of course the Dalriada are of Celtic, Aboriginal European, insular Celtic ancestry.
Origin. Dalriada, the Irish kingdom between Antrim and much of the west of Scotland and some of its islands. Regardless, as I said, Liv, I don't know if these two are interested in the conversation. I haven't heard them ask any questions or say anything.
Actually, I haven't thought of a question about like Irish history yet, but like what I know is that maybe the whole like St. Patrick's driving away the stakes might be a metaphor for paganism.
There is that theory among some of the modern polytheists that the Druids were the people who were called snakes, and that the story about Patrick driving out the snakes is a reference to driving out the Druids, but that didn't ever actually happen because the old heathen sacred tradition survives to this day in Irish-speaking areas in Ireland and Gaelic-speaking areas in Scotland. Even in Wales, there are elements of survival, although they have been diluted by what we call meso-druidry, which was the stuff that Iolo Morganwg came up with. That is the basis of a lot of the Gorseth and Eisteddfod and all that stuff. Eisteddfod, I think, is.
How about the Druids of Cornwall?
Though I'm thinking like where they're, of course, see, I think that's the best like explanation because I really don't think there were ever like literal snakes in Ireland.
No, there weren't. According to geologists and such, the last ice age receded from Ireland and northern part of Britain, which is now Scotland, rather late, so the snakes never actually made it there. Now, of course, there are snakes in Scotland now. There are adders there, which are, rather noxious creatures. But in Ireland, there weren't snakes to begin with, in a literal sense. As far as Druids, the priestly caste or class of the sacred tradition of the Celts, the Druids in Wales and Cornwall and what is now England were eradicated by the Romans during the invasion, but they didn't wipe out the sacred tradition entirely. The sacred tradition continued just without the priesthood. That didn't happen in Pict land, and it didn't happen in Ireland. And when Christianity came to those places, it didn't come by the sword like it did, say when the Teutonic Knights went into the Baltic area and conquered the Lithuanians and the Old Prussians and the Latvians and so forth and said, hey, convert or die. That kind of thing didn't happen in Ireland. What happened in Ireland was you would have the local monk or priest or missionary, whatever, would come into the area and go talk to the Ri, which gets translated as king, but originally it meant Dux Bellorum, as Geoffrey of Monmouth puts it when talking about Arthur. It means simply leader of warriors. And eventually that changed, but initially a king in the Celtic sense was not a king in the Germanic sense. That did change, but back in those days, no. So you have the missionary basically would come and talk to the Ri, who was the military leader of the Tuath at the time. Tuath now is Tua, which means tribe, and get that person to convert. And then claim, well, I've converted this tribe. Well, no, you fucking haven't. You converted one person, but whatever. And so, for centuries, the practices of the old ways have continued right alongside Catholic practices. I mean, you had a little bit more of an issue whenever Cromwell came along and did his little shit thing. But yeah, it may not have been quite right out in the open and stuff in every place. But I mean, for example, Alexander Carmichael in the late 1800s, early 1900s collected 4 volumes of stuff from the Highlands and Islands of Scotland. That, I mean, it's a mix of Christian and pre-Christian tradition. You have hymns to Bridge, you know, as a saint. You have hymns to the sun, a morning greeting to the sun that has absolutely no Christian elements in it whatsoever. You have a greeting to the new moon, which has no Christian elements in it whatsoever. I mean, you've also got a lot of stuff talking about Moira, Mary, Saint Mary, right, the Virgin, and so there's both of those traditions continued. The sad thing is that as more and more people, young people, abandon the native languages of Gaelic and Irish, the sacred, the tradition bearers are kind of not having new people to teach, because so many of these kids think that Irish or Gaelic is only good for growing potatoes. This is propaganda that the English and their sycophants have used for a few centuries now, trying to eradicate those languages.
Well, it doesn't help that in Ireland in particular, when we had become an independent state, regions that had a majority of Irish speakers were also the regions that had the highest amount of emigration. In fact, you're probably a descendant of one of the emigrants from those regions.
Well, I actually know that my ancestor on the Scottish side came in from the Isle of Mull, which is one of the Inner Hebrides, and I know what his name was. And I know the first year he appears on a census in the United States. There is some talk about how he had been in New York first, but I haven't found any evidence of that. The first place he showed up was in North Carolina.
Also, someone speaking there? Which one of you was it?
That wasn't me.
No, it wasn't me either.
I'm pretty sure one of you attempted to speak, but got cut across. Now, if you wish to speak now, now would be the opportunity.
Well, since you're giving me the chance politely, well, I had to warn you in a few minutes that I gotta go, because it's very late over here.
Where do you live?
Spain, dude.
Spain. Do you live in which region do you live in?
Near Madrid, basically, near the capital. So central Spain, give or take.
Mainland Spain.
Yeah, mainland, literally in the center of it. Close enough.
We do have a green bar across the YouTube stream now. It says the stream health is good, and it's showing up that way on my encoder as well. So as I said, it's probably something more to do with YouTube being congested on Friday nights than anything else on my end. And this, I've been thinking about moving the stream to Saturday mornings instead of Friday nights in an effort to avoid that. That might also get more views because according to the research I've looked at, Saturday morning is the best time to upload a video to YouTube if you want views and stuff like that. So I mean, I have thought about that, but I'm not really a day person, and I'm sure not a morning person. It's typically I'm going to bed about the time the sun is coming up, so there's that. But, you know, it is a possibility because my schedule is rather chaotic. It never was what anyone would call normal. And then a few years back, 25 years or so ago, I was on prednisone for 2.5 years for a condition I have. And that completely fucked it up, so it makes no sense at all now. I'm lucky to get more than 4.5 hours of sleep at a time, and usually can only do more than that if I take both 5-HTP and melatonin. I mean, taking something like diphenhydramine hydrochloride or Nitol or Benadryl or whatever you want to call that, that'll get me maybe 4.5 hours of sleep. So it's not really an effective thing. And the deal is, when I wake up, you know, it's like, well, I gotta go to the powder room. I'm gonna go to the powder room and do that. I come back out. I'm awake enough by that point in time. I'm like, well, why don't I see what the fuck is going on the internet? And at that point, all bets are off. I'm probably gonna be up for another 8 hours or so before I lie back down. So yeah, that's a bad habit, but it's like, it's not like I could actually go back to sleep anyway, so.
Sounds like a dilemma there.
Well,
Yeah.
the point is that my schedule kind of rotates around, so there will be points in time when I'm awake during the day, and there will be times when I'm not. And I don't really know if there's any order to it. I have joked occasionally that I have a 32-hour day or something, but I don't think that's accurate. It's just a weird thing.
Yeah, I can imagine that it could be a really weird thing in the end.
Some of it is seasonal as well. I mean, whenever we get around to the equinoxes, I tend to get really chaotic because the temperature is changing and the amount of light, you know, is changing as well. You come out of the winter into the vernal equinox, and you've got more light from that point on, and of course temperature begins to rise and stuff, and you go back into the dark half of the year after the autumnal equinox, whenever you've got shorter days and longer nights. I mean, the longest day of the year is the summer solstice, which is around the 21st of June. It varies a little bit each year because the Earth wobbles on its axis and stuff like that. But so, you know, it might be as early as the 19th, it might be as late as the 23rd, but usually, you know, somewhere around the 21st of June anyway. The longest day of the year, the shortest night of the year, it's called midsummer by older traditions. Certainly by Celtic traditions, it would be regarded as midsummer because summer begins at Blastington, which is, you know, early May or late April. And so autumn begins at Lunistal or Lunasa, which is late July, early August. So, according to Roman and Germanic traditions, the solstices and equinoxes are the beginnings of their respective seasons, but it's not that way in Celtic tradition. But anyway, this is why you have Shakespeare talking about A Midsummer Night's Dream. That play, that happened on like the 23rd of June, and it was the shortest night of the year, A Midsummer Night's Dream. So the longest night of the year is the winter solstice, again somewhere around the 21st of December, and that's also the shortest day of the year. There are a lot of modern vampire groups which celebrate it as their holiest day because, you know, it's the longest night of the year, right? The shortest day. But yeah. So whenever we start getting more light and more heat, that throws me off, and whenever we start getting less light and less heat, that throws me off too. And I either wind up sleeping a vast amount, more than I normally would, or I sleep erratically, even for me. And then I'm probably more likely to be up and moving around and awake and stuff during the day when it's really cold, like late January, early February, and vice versa when it's really hot, like late July, early August, because, you know, the heat and I don't get along very well. So I try to minimize my exposure to it, but then there are certain places in the world, including the one where I live, where the cold is just absolutely disgusting. So I have to be asleep when it's coldest because, you know, I can get under the cover, you know, and kind of try to stay warm that way.
Well, I guess I kind of understand you in that regard. Before I was gonna go, by the way, do you guys remember when we would always complain about the state of gaming journalism as a whole? Like, when we would point out the hypocrisy, the bullshit. Guess what's happening? Spanish gaming journalism is stepping into the game.
Yes, yes.
Really?
This stuff is still going on. We do have a few outlets now that are more, what you would say, user-friendly, I guess. But then you've also got these arrogant twats who don't really want to write about games, but it was the only thing they could find available as a job after they graduated with their degree in communications or journalism or whatever. And they want to go on and work for the Chicago Tribune or the Washington Post or New York Times or something like that. But, you know, not everybody with a degree in journalism can work for one of those outlets.
Yeah, well, all of this, which I'm like one of those guys that says that Gamergate is already a dead thing. It's already dead. Well, apparently Spanish gaming journalism is hopping into the controversy 4 years after.
Really?
Like, really, dude? Now you're talking about this shit 4 hours after? No, 4 years after? I cannot even think about how stupid it looks. And not only that, for example, Lord Blastington. Did you know that Daniel Vavra, the maker of Kingdom Come himself, was gonna come here to Spain to make a talk?
Yeah, and
the Spanish Inquisition showed up and drove him away.
Oh,
no one
boy.
expects the Spanish Inquisition.
What? Well, you know, the gaming outlets of Spain showed up saying that he was a fascist, that he would bring fascism to Spain, and I'm like, nah, dudes, we ourselves brought fascism into this. Remember 1939? We ourselves did it. I doubt a gaming developer from the Czech Republic would bring fascism to Spain. Imagine that. And also, oh, hello.
DDR dropped out briefly.
Yeah,
I was swapping device, so I had to drop.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, we were discussing about how basically gaming journalism in Spain has become the new Inquisition. Because apparently gaming journalism has hopped into the Gamergate hate train 4 years after Gamergate was over.
Yeah, that actually I just kind of like posted a little comic that actually that reminded me of what you said. Like,
but go on.
A part of it is media sensationalism. Negative news, especially exciting negative news, say fascists, for instance, tend to get an awful lot of clicks.
Yep, apparently so. Well, as I was telling him, Daniel Barbara himself, the creator of Kingdom Come, was gonna show up here to make a talk, and I was genuinely interested in getting into his part of the con and, you know, meeting the man himself, because I believe his game has actually done a lot of research. As a fucking amateur historian that I am, I still have to get my degree though. So, in the end, though, the Spanish gaming outlets came up calling him all kinds of shit. Then you had the Ratfem movement also showing up to call him shit, and in the end, he ended up doing his talk in Poland. In the end, though, I think I was the one who lost. I and other people who were interested in hearing the man talk were the ones who lost the most.
What do
Yeah,
you
that-
actually have to say?
What?
Man, that actually really sucks. Like,
Yeah, because I was interested in hearing the man talk. You know, and was like, I'm like, oh, cool! Like the guy who made a medieval game with all this kind of research he said he did. I want to know what kind of research he did in order to develop the game.
You know, I've been looking at Assassin's Creed 2 on Steam. I've wanted to play that for a long time, but I'm a little bit concerned about the you know, how the controls would be on a PC instead of a console. I don't really play console games because I tend to play them for far too long, and it starts my thumb pads get sore, you know, from holding the controller. But I thought that game looked interesting since it first came out several years ago. You know, to play in Renaissance Italy seems very interesting. Because I also have Italian ancestry as well as Scottish and Irish and Cherokee and several other. Yeah.
You're no Aboriginal European, you're mixed.
This is what I've said repeatedly. I am of mixed ethnicities. I am Aboriginal European, Caucasian, and Native American. So I mean, I've got German. I've got German and Italian and Norman and Norse ancestry, not Norwegian, Norse, that far back. I've got Irish and Scottish and Welsh and Breton ancestry as well. There is some French. I'm not sure if it's French or Norman French or Breton, but French. There is some English, but it looks like the English came from France, so that's where the French comes in. There's also the name Taylor, which is either English or a translation of something into English. And then there is Native American, Cherokee.
Well, I was gonna tell Jan about the Assassin's Creed 2 controls for PC. I managed to play perfectly fine on keyboard and mouse, so the controls are not that bad in the end. I mean, at least they're not Dark Souls 1 level of terrible.
Well, I mean, is it? I mean, like Bayonetta. You know, Bayonetta is pretty complicated for PC, I think.
Nah, I don't think it's as complicated as Bayonetta in that regard.
Okay, cool. So I might look into getting that. It's a relatively small download, and it's within my. I mean, I have that much in my Steam wallet right now, so.
The one issue I find with Assassin's Creed 2 is, well, depending on you play, sometimes it will save the progress, but there was a time in which it wouldn't save it. Because fucking you play sometimes.
Oh yes, you play. Yeah, I have Far Cry Primal already, so I've got that for that as well.
What a mess of a platform.
Well, you know, Far Cry Primal has the Wunja, which is a sort of dialect of reconstructed Proto-Indo-European, so we're getting back into linguistic stuff here. That was the entire reason I wanted the game. I don't really have that much interest in playing a survival game or playing a game set in, you know, prehistoric times or the like. I just wanted to get it for the linguistic interest because I'm that much of a nerd, right?
Yeah, but it's fine. Everyone is a nerd. I think everyone here is a nerd, actually. Well, in different stuff.
Yeah, we all are.
In the end, though, there's a thing I'm gonna complain about Assassin's Creed 2. Yeah, the fucking feathers. 107 feathers in the game, I think. Which must have been an early warning, because in every Ubisoft open world game, they had to add these fucking collectibles everywhere. which I don't understand the point of it sometimes. It's like it's there to pad out the game, you know? Sometimes I have the feeling with that. Also, now I really gotta go. Otherwise, I'm not gonna get enough sleep.
Good night.
Have a
Good night. Yeah, thank you.
Sleep well.
Thank you. Nice meeting you, by the way.
Yeah, good night, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks to you for letting me be here with you. So yeah, see you guys later.
Have a good night.
Good night. Now that he's out of the picture, I'll take off my shirt. Let's get the show really started.
Uh-huh.
Now my man boobies are out.
Oh, goodness. It's too bad there's no camera in here, huh?
I can make that thing.
So I take it you are a pretty large guy, I guess.
Not really. That was just a joke.
Yeah.
Were you hoping I was not joking?
I just kind of said like you got man.
But yeah, no.
This last stream, I was in another phone call.
Yeah, I have a boyfriend. He sometimes comes in here and sits while I'm streaming. Doesn't talk much.
Yeah, was it? I've talked to him already, I think.
Yeah, I believe he's currently playing Warhammer.
He's usually playing something when he's not at work.
Speaking of like games, like actually I originally got Jurassic World Evolution. It's basically a sim game where you build your own Jurassic Park. I did actually pretty good. Like it's pretty well made.
That might be something our mutual friend Amon would be interested in, although I don't know. He does tend to get a little Ross Geller over the inaccurate depictions of dinosaurs. You know, that I call him Ross Geller occasionally because, you know, there's that scene in Friends where Ross is on the phone with somebody and he's like, no. They're talking about the Flintstones of all things, and he says, no, Dino was not a velociraptor. If he'd been a velociraptor, he would have eaten the Flintstones. And they go back and forth a little bit. I mean, it lasts about 3 minutes or something. It was pretty funny. So every time Amon starts going on about how, you know, dinosaurs had feathers, not scales, and whatever else. So they didn't have... they couldn't bend their wrists. This particular species couldn't bend their wrists like that. Those arms are too long for a T-Rex, and, you know, this kind of stuff. Then I start laughing at him and saying, hey, Ross, what's going on?
Well, to be fair, like for the most part, like when the original Jurassic Park movie came out, the dinosaurs were accurate based on what we currently know, though at that time, of course, but there are a few exceptions. Like, well, for starter, like the Velociraptor was the real Velociraptor was almost as big as a pit bull, so they kind of exaggerate the size of the Velociraptor. Though there are close relatives of the raptors that are more closer to the size of the movie monsters, like the Deinonychus, and also like around the time of production of the first Jurassic Park, they discovered the Utah Raptor, which actually is bigger than the movie monster. Yeah, I'm kind of like interested in dinosaurs as well.
Yeah, it's too bad I haven't had Amon come into a stream in quite a while. He only came in back when I was first getting the channel set up and was testing things, so he came in to help me figure out what was what, and, you know, I had him and some other people sit in the live chat a few times too to verify that they could actually hear me and see things and stuff like that. But yeah, I actually left one of those up. It's called Testing New Plugin and Live Chat with Friends or something like that. So they weren't actually in the stream, but they were sitting out in the text chat and I was interacting with them.
Silverfox made an interesting comment actually in Atrium. If I can't actually read his YouTube comments anymore, because I'm on mobile now, but made an interesting comment there about our gentleman Kill. Sorry for interrupting you there for a moment. Was like I wanted to point that out before I went to sleep because I probably will have to go to sleep relatively soon.
Okay. Say, before you go, DR, what kind of games do you like to play?
I currently play an awful lot of EVE Online, actually.
Nice, like
Eve Online? That that sounds like a terrifying game. I can't imagine spending money on something only to have it destroyed by another player.
yeah, I think it's kind of like a multiplayer sandbox sort of experience.
Ryan, or Lord Blastington, and I do play Star Trek Online quite a bit. I don't play as much as I used to. I mean, I have over 7,000 hours logged just on Steam alone, and there's also, I don't know how much time through Arc, and there's time I've played without using either of those. So I probably have 7,500 hours in that game.
Yeah, the expansion just hit. Did you at least play like the new missions?
I've played the first 3, maybe 4. I forget now exactly how many. I was planning to go back in on Thursday, Wednesday or Thursday. I forget now. But that was when we had that colossal update that took hours and hours and hours. Huh. Oh my goodness. No, that was last Friday. That was the colossal update. I think. I don't remember.
What game is this?
Oh, Star Trek
what
Online.
games?
Star Trek Online.
Yeah.
I see. Oh, yeah. Is it any good?
It's pretty good. Like, it's actually mostly like you're in like for the story as well as the cues. Like, recently they added a Deep Space Nine themed expansion that included a playable Dominion faction.
Yeah, it's Star Trek Online has gotten both better and worse since I started playing it. Different things have gotten better and different things have gotten worse. And I mean, I've talked about a little bit before in one of these streams. Like when I first started, the cash shop was primarily just cosmetic stuff and things to make your life in game a little easier. But nothing that you actually had to have. I mean, you had to buy a T5, a Tier 5 vessel, right? But you could also get those occasionally with certain events. Like we have a summer event and a winter event and an anniversary event. There's usually a free ship of the highest tier with those events. But, so like you didn't have to buy the ship, and even if you wanted to get one out of the C-store, you could go ahead and farm dilithium in-game and then exchange it for Zen, which is their in-game currency that you buy with real money. But, like, yeah, you can buy it with dilithium as well from other players. And, I mean, so there was that option. There still is, only now we have T6 ships as well, which T6 is the highest tier of ships in the game now. Well, I mean, I guess fleet tier 6 ships would be the highest tier because they're everything that the T6 ship is without the ship mastery trait, which means that you want to get the basic T6 ship first and get all the mastery completed in it so you get that trait, and then you can go buy a fleet version of the ship using fleet modules and dilithium in game, and it's the same thing. You have to get the mastery in that again, but it doesn't go all the way to level 5 mastery, which is where you would get the trait. It just goes to 4. But the whole strength is usually a little better. Some of the other stuff is a little better. So the T6 fleet ships are probably the best in game. Then there's also stuff you can get from lockboxes. So, you know, there are T5 and T6 ships that come out of lockboxes, and there are, I think, maybe still a few T5 ships in the lobby store, but there's certainly T6 ships in the lobby store, which you can get with lobby, which you get by opening lockboxes. And again, you want to open a lockbox, you've got to have a master key, which you either buy with Zen, which you get with real-world money, or you farm the lithium and buy the Zen with that to get something from the C-store.
Or buy the keys with NG credits from the exchange.
Right. So there is that. That thing is not quite as economically benevolent, I guess, as it used to be, but it's not horrible. Like, you know, you have to pay for new DLC and blah blah blah. You don't have to do that. It's not like some of those games. And then there are other things that have improved, like we now have a Romulan faction, which we didn't have when I started. You no longer have to create a Federation character before you can create a Klingon character. You know, I mean, when I started, you had to make a Federation character and get to level, what was it, 10 or 20 before you could start a character in the Klingon faction. But that's no longer necessary. We have an original series sort of sub-faction. They have to be Federation, but they start out different because they start out in the 2200s instead of 2400s, where everyone else starts out. And now we have a new faction as well, that is the Dominion/Cardassian faction. So those have been some improvements there, and of course we do have better ships and more to get, you know, more stuff than we did back then. So you can get different weapons, different types of beam energy weapons, different kinds of torpedoes, different kinds of consoles and such things as that that were not available in the beginning.
Can I be a pirate?
I mean, yeah, you can. It would be roleplay. There has been talk from players about maybe introducing like a mercenary faction at some point in time, but so far I don't think the developers have been too interested in that. It would be a good option for people who don't want to have characters in the military, but ultimately they would have to ally with one or another faction in order to progress.
Actually, when it comes to think about, like, your player character is technically a privateer.
Yeah, I mean, you do what you want, basically. You don't even have to do the storyline missions if you don't want. I have a few characters that are at level 60 now, and the cap just went up to 65, so until, like, last week, I guess, they were at the level cap, and some of them have never played. I mean, all my characters are at level 60 except for one with whom I've been playing the new missions, and she's like 63 now. Yeah, you can you can level up and do all kinds of nifty stuff without ever doing any of the storyline missions if you want. You can just go into the PvE queues and run around doing patrol missions and stuff like that, or Empire Defense, or these kind of things that you can do and still level up without having to do the storylines. I don't recommend it because you get more experience from the first run of a storyline mission than you do from the PvE queues and things like that. But yeah, it's entirely possible to get to what is the level cap. I wouldn't want to, I would not recommend trying to get from level 50 to level 60 except by doing the storyline missions, because the amount of experience necessary to get from 50 to 60 is rather enormous. It would take quite a while, but it is doable. And then, let's see. Oh, there's also been talk about introducing a Ferengi faction, and the Ferengi are merchants, so there would be, like a merchant faction instead of a military faction. But I don't know that the devs have expressed much interest in that either.
Okay, there's a reason why I asked if you could be a pirate in that game. And the reason is because as an EVE player, there's no such thing as railroading. As in, quite literally everything you do is deliberate and chosen by you to do, including things you don't do. And a good way of asking how free you are in a game is, can you be a pirate? Can you grief other players? Can you steal from them? Be a genuine pirate.
You cannot steal from other characters. You can, certainly there are griefers in the game. They're not very well liked, obviously. We do have PvP. We do have PvP as well. And I do participate in PvP occasionally, not as much as I used to. But yeah, we've got it. So, I mean, you can do that kind of thing.
Does PvP matter?
Do what now?
Does the PvP matter?
Matter in what sense? I mean, there is a new reputation called competitive war games, in which PvP does actually earn you reputation marks, so you can level up that particular reputation and get various gear and such things.
In EVE, death, loss of a ship is literally loss of that ship. That ship is not coming back. You have to buy a new one. So combat actually means something in EVE.
Yes, I know, and
that's
what I was referring to earlier when I said I really can't imagine spending money on something and then having it destroyed by another player irrevocably. So, I mean, your ship blows up, yeah, but you just go to the... I mean, it respawns. And if you're in elite difficulty level, you will get ship injuries, they call them. So you would have to go to an engineer or have... what do they call those things, Ryan?
There's actually... you have to actually get those, like, a special consumable item that you can actually repair your ship on site. I don't remember the exact name on top of my head, but...
Components. I think they're just called, like, critical components and major components and minor components, depending on the type of injury the ship has received. You also have ground injuries on your character that have the same 3 levels of severity, and you have to get regenerators, I think is what they're called, to heal those injuries. Or you can go to the sick bay on in a social zone like or Space Dock or New Romulus Command or First City on Kronos or whatever. And injuries do interfere with your ability to compete. So, like, if you get hull damage, then it makes your ship weaker to attack. If you get like, say, energy weapon damage, then you're not going to be doing as much damage or have as much accuracy with your beam weapons or your cannons. If you have torpedo launcher tube, whatever, damage, then obviously, again, the damage and accuracy of your torpedoes is going to be decreased, and so, I mean, there's shield damage and engine damage and I don't know what all.
Say, DDR, are you a fan of Star Trek?
Star what?
Star Trek. Are you a fan of Star Trek?
Never watched it much. Too young to, actually. People often forget that I'm only 21 years of age, so.
Oh.
Well, you're gonna have to watch it.
Did you?
I know the rule that I have to watch every second film.
Well, that's not entirely true. That's a personal choice. There are people who say that the even-numbered movies are not as good as the odd numbers, and there are people who say otherwise, and there are people who say they're, it doesn't matter what the number is on the movie. Some of them are great and some of them suck, and there are other people who say they're all great, and then there are people who say the movies with the original cast are better than any of the other movies. You got people who say that the new reimagining or relaunch or whatever you want to call it just isn't really Star Trek. There are different opinions in the fandom about these movies, and certainly there are the series as well. The original series from the 60s, the animated series from the 70s, which the canonicity thereof is debated hotly, and as far as CBS and Paramount are concerned, it changes periodically whether it's considered canon or not. There's the Next Generation from the late 80s into the 90s. There is Deep Space Nine in the 90s, Voyager in the 90s and into, I guess, this century. Enterprise then came, and now there is this new one, Discovery, yeah, which I haven't seen at all yet. I'm waiting for the DVDs, because it's a thing that you have to watch through paid streaming service, or it's called CBS All Access, and I don't know of anything else that's available only through that I really give a damn about, so I don't really want to spend that money just to watch one show a week,
I think like the first season of Discovery is now available on Netflix.
Yeah, well, my boyfriend has Netflix, I don't, so whenever I get back to where he is, then I will be able to access his Netflix, but for the moment...
Are you two separated?
Well, I had to come down here, where I am now. When my mom passed away, my dad was depressed, understandably, and not taking care of himself or the house, not eating right, that kind of stuff. So I moved in with him, and he passed away 3 years ago now. I'm still trying to get the house cleaned up, cleaned out, and get someone in here to do repairs so that I can sell it. And then I will be moving back there.
Oh.
Damn. Sorry about your parents.
Oh, it's, thanks, but, and in the case of my dad, at least, he's better off, I guess, if you believe in an afterlife, because the last 6-7 months of his life, he was in and out of the hospital, in and out of the nursing home, in and out of physical rehabs, trying to get some strength back. He died of lymphoma, so he was pretty miserable, and the last day he was alive was agony even to watch. I'm sure it must have been a living hell for him. I don't want to go into too much detail because it's kind of gross, the amount of vomit that came out of him, the poor guy. So, I mean, it's like he's not suffering anymore, at least. And Mom, well, she's been gone for, I guess 8 years now. So, yeah, she, I think, I honestly believe that her doctor had a lot to do with that, because at one point her doctor had her on 8 different high blood pressure medications simultaneously. And
Well,
that's not sane. All of us, her kids...
Malpractice, 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 malpractice.
Well, you know, there is a statute of limitations, unfortunately, and I don't have access to all the records, so I can't blah, blah, blah. But on top of that, I mean, my sisters and I, and at least a couple of my nieces, told Mom and Dad repeatedly that this woman is a quack, you need to go to someone else, and, oh no, she's just wonderful, blah, 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 blah. And I was, oh God, you know, so, I mean, Mom never had any heart trouble until she was on those 8 different medications for high blood pressure at once. And then suddenly she's in the hospital in intensive care with, what do they call it? Congestive heart failure and stuff like that. And eventually, when she did pass away, finally, she was in the hospital again with some kind of heart-related issue and died from pneumonia, which is apparently a thing that happens when you go in the hospital and you're already in a weakened state. I don't understand why they can't, you know, do something about that, because, I mean, pneumonia is either viral or bacterial, and certainly they have agents to treat it. So, I mean, but a lot of older people, whenever they go in the hospital and they already have some condition that has left them in a weakened state, they wind up dying not from the condition they have, but from pneumonia that they contracted while they were in the hospital.
That's, yeah, like, that's kind of like very freaky, like you hear like all these, like, I'm thinking like maybe like all these like medical mishaps, stories of medical mishaps you hear about is probably some reason why people go to like even bigger quacks, like.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, I certainly missed them. I really honestly, I expected Dad to go before Mom did, because she was always in relatively good health for as long as I can remember, until, you know, just toward the end of her life. And Dad, for as long as I can remember, was in and out of the hospital because he had ulcerative colitis. I mean, I don't know when he was first diagnosed, but I kind of vaguely remember it, I think. But, you know, he might have had it before I even came along. I don't know. I just remember going to specialists in various weird places in Houston, and him being, you know, finding out that he had, it seems like that we found out that he had colitis, and I was quite young. It would have been in the early 70s, I guess. So I would have been, you know, under 10 years old at the time. But I don't...
So you're about 25 now, are you?
Yeah, and 25 several times over. Well, 25 a couple of times over. So, I mean, yeah, it's been a long time, and I don't really remember, and I was, as I said, rather young at the time, so I maybe didn't know everything from before that, or hadn't been aware of it before then, or whatever. But I seem to remember a time when we sort of, or at least I, found out that he had this condition. So, I mean, he had a lot of trouble with that throughout his life. And then later, a few years back now, it's probably been 15 or maybe 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. So there was that. And so they thought they had got it all, but the last doctor that he saw, his doctor, the guy that I wanted him to go back to after he had started going to someone else, who was a cancer specialist, she was, I got him to go back to his original doctor, and that guy decided that he had lymphoma, and he thought that the prostate cancer had never been actually cured and had spread into his lymph system, and it turned out that's what was. And by that point in time, it was probably a little too late. He did give him A bunch of prescriptions. I think they cost over $500 for the first little, collection of them, because I went and paid for them myself. And, what wasn't covered by the insurance and stuff. And so, I think the amount that I myself spent was over $500. So there was that. And then it wasn't very long after that. I think maybe I got them refilled once, and then he was gone. So, yeah, it was probably too late by the time I finally convinced him to go back to the decent doctor. There's a lot of quackery in the American medical community. There are good doctors too, of course, but it all depends on where you're at. And where we are, yeah, it's kind of a you take it or leave it kind of situation. Or I say where we are, where I am now, where he was then, and we were then. But yeah.
I just got to be right back for a quick second.
Okay.
In general, though, what's it, quackery is pretty common in a place that, let's say, glorifies deregulation.
Yeah, well, yeah. I've been bitching about deregulation since the Reagan years. Because that's when it really got started. There was a little bit here and there, I think, under Carter. But nothing like what started under Reagan, and then it kind of took off in a geometrical kind of increase under Bill Clinton, and I am ashamed to admit that I voted for him for president his first term, but that was because I believed what the Republicans were saying about him, that he was a socialist. So I helped to elect this guy, and then he turned out to be anything but a socialist, By 1994, early 1994, which would have been just over a year after he took office as president, I was like, man, fuck this guy and fuck everything about him. And, so I went green at that point. In 1996, we had another election. I voted for Ralph Nader, who was the Green Party nominee for president. And, I've been green or greenish ever since then. I finally joined the party, the Green Party, in 2016. But, I certainly had been voting green since the mid-90s. And honestly, that was the first time I had joined a political party since, I first registered many years ago. I didn't stay in that party very long, like a year and a half maybe. No, yeah, let me see. So maybe about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, and then I was like, well, fuck this party. And so I just kind of wasn't registered as any kind of party member after that, and I voted for whoever I thought, would do a good job. And at the time, there was all this rhetoric about how the Democrats were leftists and socialists and liberals, and none of that was true. None of it was true.
Okay, I'm back.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
Regardless, yeah, no, there's never going to be socialist in American politics anytime soon, Liv.
Well, we do have
socialist
parties, and some of them do have elected officials. There is, the Green Party is explicitly, in the United States, the Green Party of the United States is explicitly a socialist party in our platform. It describes our economic views, and it refers to them as cooperative commonwealth or eco-socialist. And I think it maybe uses one other term, but those are the two that stick out to me because I agree with them both. I, in fact, call myself a cooperative commonwealth eco-socialist. And there is the Socialist Alternative Party as well. The Green Party has people elected to state and local offices in various places in the United States. The state of Maine is one of the big places with quite a lot of Green Party people in elected office. Socialist Alternative has some at least local politicians in its membership, such as the rather well-known Kshama Sawant, who is a member of the Seattle City Council. She's probably the most well-known of the people from Socialist Alternative. There are assorted other parties in the United States that are explicitly socialist. It's in their name. There is the Democratic Socialists of America, which seems at the moment to be mostly a kind of faction within the Democratic Party, and they just kind of endorse whichever Democratic candidate they think is a Democratic Socialist. So, I mean, they're very pro-Bernie Sanders, but I'm not really sure who else they support. They haven't, as far as I know, run any candidates on their own ticket so far.
I do think Sanders is actually a socialist, but I don't think he advocates for socialist policy because he knows he can't actually do that.
I think maybe...
But he's involved in radical politics historically.
I think Bernie is probably best described as falling somewhere between democratic socialism and social democracy, but that is...
No, his platform is social democracy, full stop. But I do think he is actually, politically speaking, a socialist in terms of ideology.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying because of the difference between what he actually would like to do and what he actually does, right? So I'm saying that's why I place him somewhere between democratic socialist and social democrat. And with regard to most of the people in the Democratic Party, I mean, the overwhelming majority of the establishment of that party is neoliberal, which is, of course, a right-wing economic perspective. So was Reagan, so was Bush the Elder, so was Bush the Lesser. I'm not really sure about Trump. He's either a neoliberal or an objectivist, and those would both wind up in the same shit if they were allowed to get to their logical conclusions, because of course the objectivists have all this idealistic bullshit about consumers and boycotts and things like that, but with the deregulation that they want and the anti-labor policies and dismantling the federal government and that kind of shit, what you would wind up with would be the same situation with the corporations running everything, in spite of any attempt to, stage consumer boycotts and things like that, because you can't really boycott a company when it's the only company that provides something, and that's, you would have monopolies with the policies that they want, and if that company is providing a good or a service which you have to have, how are you going to protest and boycott them? You can't really do it. It's not really feasible. It's not even rational to suggest it.
An awful lot of neo-Marxist analysis actually relies heavily on, or rather discusses quite heavily, monopoly capitalism. In particular, because it's become much more common that monopolies form, or monopolies form, in mature economies in the West. That in general, that was actually that even in classical Marxism, it was always recognized that was the end consequence of any form of, what's the term I'm looking for? It escapes me right now, but it's basically the way you refer to a business in economics. Crap, what was it called again?
I don't know what you're looking for here.
Not specifically how you refer to business in like a business entity within economics. It's a particular term for it. Firm. That's what I'm looking for. Firm.
Oh, yes.
What's it at? It had already concluded that basically many firms would already end up monopolies in the long run. But classical Marxism was still in an era when competitive capital was still dominant due to being much earlier. New industries constantly appearing and disappearing, etc., etc. And regulation was still relatively low. So you had one of the most common forms of competition was, well, fraud, essentially. Fraudulent product. Or worse, malfunctioning product. That was presented as it was working, but it still was competitive, technically speaking.
Certainly you have this, this thing, monopoly was until the Sherman Antitrust Act, the tendency of the corporations in the United States was to not compete. They wanted to get to a point where they didn't have to compete. So all this bullshit about the free market and competition that you hear from so many of these objectivists and other far right wingers, it's nonsense, because that's not what capitalism tends towards. And the less regulation you have, less oversight you have, the less labor solidarity that you have, the more anti-labor policies and laws that you have, the more likely the corporation is to achieve that goal. So, I mean, this was one of the issues that we're facing right now, in fact, is that we have, say, like the Telecommunications Act of 1996, deregulated the telecommunications industry. So now we have over 90% of the media in this country owned by the same 5 or 6 mega corporations. And it's no wonder that we're getting the same shit from all of our news, basically. If you want to find something out about what's going on, you don't watch CNN or MSNBC or Fox or CBS or NBC or ABC or whatever. You go to independent journalists, or you go to foreign news outlets. For a long time, I read almost nothing but the Scotsman and Edinburgh Evening News and Scotland on Sunday and Glasgow Herald, the Irish Times, the Irish News, the Guardian, La Repubblica, which is in Italy. There's a newspaper from Switzerland I used to read too, and I can't remember the name of it. And then back in the 80s, when the Soviet Union was still around, I would read both American news and Pravda Pulse, which was an English translation of Pravda, and I would read a Swiss newspaper as well for the neutral perspective, so that I could maybe get some kind of semblance of truth out of the combination there. Yeah, because I mean, we've got talking heads who spew propaganda at us, and instead of journalists. There was a time when we had people like Edward R. Murrow and Walter Cronkite and Dan Rather, and I know Dan Rather gets a lot of shit because of something that he did during Bush Jr.'s administration or campaign or whatever, and it came out later that it wasn't true and they hadn't fact-checked it sufficiently. I understand he fucked up once, but that doesn't mean that his entire career was a sham. The man was a decent and ethical journalist. He was one of the people who would hop on a plane and fly off to Iraq as the first Gulf War was about to start, and talked to Saddam Hussein, interviewed the guy on air, right? He went to Vietnam, right, and was doing journalism. He was a journalist. So, I mean, there's no comparison between him and some ass clown like Sean Hannity or some paid shill like Rachel Madcow, right?
Wait, that's actually her name, Rachel Madcow?
No, that's just what I call her. Her name is Maddow. Rachel Maddow, but I call her Rachel Madcow.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, seriously, I mean,
Madcow.
right now you've got people on RT America like Lee Camp, who's really a comedian, but, you know, you get some decent news from comedians because they can say things that, they can joke about things and say things as a joke that they maybe couldn't say if they were just coming out and saying it, right? Jimmy Dore is like that as well. But I think both of them do quite a bit more journalism than the people who are supposedly journalists. Then you've got people like Abby Martin, who used to work with RT and is now selling her show to Telesur. There are people like Mike Figueiredo with the Humanist Report, and there are a few other people that I watch on YouTube who do this kind of thing. And you've also got fake progressives, what we call faux-gressives. So you've got Cenk Uygur and Ben Mankiewicz, and those guys over on the main TYT channel. Yeah, they're kind of basically partisan Democrats. You get a few people like Kyle Kulinski, who he's part of the TYT network as well. But I think he really is wanting to be a progressive, but still holds on to this idea that it's possible to reform the Democratic Party. And with both him and Cenk, back when they first started that Justice Democrats thing, I actually sent them, things in Google Plus as private messages. I sent them, made comments on their posts on Google Plus. I made comments on their videos. I pointed out to them the exact places in the Democratic Party charter and bylaws which were changed back in 1973 in an effort to prevent any progressive candidate from ever being nominated again. And so far, since that time, there hasn't been. I mean, that was George McGovern in '72, and that was it. They haven't nominated another progressive for president since then. Not only did they have that in mind, they also wanted to put obstacles in the way of any kind of grassroots reform or grassroots takeover of the party. Then along came the superdelegates in 1982, where they passed the resolution or new bylaw or whatever to introduce superdelegates, and then they actually implemented it in 1984. It's been just one shit after another. We're now back in the days of Tammany Hall again. We've got Boss Tweed running the show, and it's turned into a political machine rather than a political party. It's a thing where it's a top-down organization instead of a democratic organization. I call it the anti-democratic party, right? Because they don't let the people have any say. The 2017 legal case, where their lawyers, the DNC's lawyers, went before a judge and said, well, these Bernie supporters should have known the primary was rigged, right? I mean, they actually said this. I mean, maybe didn't use the exact word rigged, but yeah. And they also said that the Democratic National Committee had the right to choose their candidate in a smoke-filled back room. This is not a democratic organization. It's like, Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Does anyone really believe that it's democratic? Again, a party that rigged its own primary in 2016 in favor of its preferred candidate. That's democratic? No. In what episode of The Twilight Zone is this democratic? Is this the bizarro world now? Seriously, this is bullshit. And I mean, I've gone on and on and on and on about this repeatedly, both on this channel and in my publication, various places on Twitter and Google+. I've talked about this, and I've been talking about it for years. You know, I was talking about bifurcation fallacy 20 years ago and trying to explain that the two parties were both shit. You know, so I mean, and I get some clown that comes into a comment. I made a response to a comment by Sargon on a video done by Gary Edwards today. And I was trying to, you know, explain that there are 3 different groups in the United States which use the term progressive, and they're not the same. You know, they're different groups. Because he's always talking about progressives this and progressives that, and I'm like, no, you mean SJWs, as you call them. They're not progressives, no matter how much they call themselves that. And every time I try to point this out, I get some fucking ass clown who comes up and says, well, that's just a no true Scotsman fallacy. And I'm like, no, a no true Scotsman fallacy would be if I were to say something like, no, real progressive would blah blah blah. That's not what it is. It's me trying to hold the term to have an actual meaning instead of just being used for whatever goddamn fool thing you want to use it for. You know, I mean, you can call yourself democratic like the DPRK. You can call yourself democratic like the Democratic Party. It doesn't make you democratic. I can say I'm Mary Queen of Scots, but it doesn't make my name Mary. And it doesn't make me the Queen of Scots. Obviously, you can call yourself Napoleon Bonaparte, but you know you're not Napoleon Bonaparte. You know, just because you say something doesn't make it so. Just because you call yourself, you know, whatever you want to call yourself, it doesn't make it so. So,
Right.
Yeah, there's a difference between rhetoric and, you know, truth, right? Rhetoric is about persuading and winning, and truth is truth.
Also, Liv, is that the comment you made to Sargon about your brand socialism not being about quality of outcome?
Not being what?
Quality of outcome.
Oh, I did say something about that as well, yeah.
Yeah.
That was like at the end of what I said, I think.
No, it was one of the first things you said.
I did revise or edit that comment a bit to add some more in there, so I'm not really sure what it says right now. There have been a few more comments since I last visited it, so I haven't been back there in some hours. I mean, I took a nap before I got ready to stream and stuff.
Did you see my counterpoint to your statement that Marxism is about quality of outcome?
I saw what you said in the Discord server. I didn't see anything on YouTube.
No, I put it in the Discord server. I didn't say a point of putting it in the YouTube comments.
I saw it in the Discord server, and I think I replied to it.
I gotta take a look. What channel is on the Discord
You
server?
didn't.
Hello?
It's in the atrium.
Okay, 1 second.
I can read it out for you if you want. He's asking me for the sources now conveniently.
Butt cheek?
Guy called Boredom Kills.
Oh yeah, boredom kills, like.
The guy who says he has the intellectual rigor to beat professors with a college degree. Yes, he just said that, by the way.
Okay, do you think he's listening to the stream right now?
I don't particularly care.
Yeah, like.
The man discussed with me and argued in bad faith, so I'm not going to really treat him with any respect. But anyway, yeah. The idea that Marxism is based off equality of outcome is not true.
Oh, I see what happened. I did respond, and what happened was I was on the phone at the time, and my connection crapped out on me just after I posted the reply, so it didn't actually go through, unfortunately. and I thought that it did. So I mean, it looked like it went through on my end, and then when I came back, it hadn't gone through, and so I was like, well, fuck it, I'll just reply again later, because at that point I was like, I'm going to bed. I've got to get some sleep, or else I'm not going to be able to stream tonight. I almost didn't. In fact, whenever the alarm finally went off, I was like, wah. So I was holding like my phone at that point, and drifting back into sleep, and if I hadn't almost dropped my phone, I would have fallen back to sleep, and there wouldn't have been a stream until, I probably wouldn't be awake now, honestly, because I mean, I slept for about 3 hours, so that's nowhere near enough, but yeah.
Yeah, like
So-
the other week I
So,
kind of understand, like, sorry,
no, go ahead.
I think like the other week I had to like sub in from someone doing a graveyard shift at a condo, and I had to I had to go to this like different building and stay up all night. Like, personally, I don't have like a problem staying up all night if if it's basically on my own terms, but like playing some games in front of my computer, but sometimes like it's kind of like when I do it for work, it's kind of like really takes a lot out of you.
Yeah, so what I was going to say in response to the thing about, I did. What I said was, and I think you replied to me. We even actually talked about it at some point, because I remember you saying there's a difference between private property and personal property.
Yes, I actually included a reference to Mark's material on it.
Yeah, I thought that was in response to what I had said about Marxists believing all things should be held in common.
We don't literally believe in everything being held in common.
And I am aware of the distinction between personal and private property.
I certainly hope so. You're a socialist yourself, and I hope you practice the difference as well in your praxis. I'd rather not have to share my toothbrush with you.
Exactly, right? And I don't want to share my boyfriend with anyone else either. Not that he's property, of course. But
He's my property.
No.
Property of the DDR.
He's mine. He's all mine. But anyway, yeah. I mean, I know that there is a distinction made between personal and private property. The thing is, I'm going to argue about what exactly constitutes personal and private property. See, in the model of socialism that I've talked about, a cooperative commonwealth, what you have is a cooperative economy. You have businesses set up as cooperatives, so that quite literally the basic ideal of socialism, the means of production owned and controlled by the producers, right? That's exactly what a cooperative is. A cooperative is a business which is owned and controlled by the people who work there. It's not, daddy's little half-wit son who couldn't get a job somewhere else, who then becomes the manager because daddy wants him to have a job and make some money. It's not some fresh out of university with a BA in business management wet behind the ears dumb fuck who has no experience in life and has no idea what is and is not possible in the particular industry he or she is trying to manage. It's not, someone who's been indoctrinated in Milton Friedman or Hayek or any of these other right-wing economists. It's the people who actually do the work, the people who know what is possible and what isn't. And I mean, yeah, you can push the limits sometimes, and you may be able to get beyond what is the current limit, right, with technological progress and so forth. and I mean, even in terms of physical capability, the human animal is constantly evolving and getting better at this and that. But, you know, there are certain things that just aren't fucking possible. It would be like someone coming up to me and saying, okay, make a round square. And I'm like, what? You know, it's intrinsically impossible in that case. I mean, I'm exaggerating the comparison, obviously, because I don't really think anyone in management is asking people doing the job to do something which is intrinsically impossible. But, you know, I don't know. Some of these people are absolute fuckwits. But then we also have this kind of idea of a community, an agricultural community, where you have people who each have a given thing, like, say, this is how the rural communities in the United States survived the Depression before the New Deal and the economic boom from the military-industrial complex of World War II actually kicked in and started improving the economy. You had people that had to cooperate with each other. They reverted back to the vestigial elements of tribalism, which were still present in the society. So, like, if Joe down the road here has a tractor and I don't, and he has a turning, a turning disc attachment for his tractor, he comes up the road here and he plows my garden, and then, maybe I have a tiller myself and I go out and till it and I plant and I weed and I, take care of the crop, and then I, whenever the time for harvest comes, either I harvest it myself or my family harvests it, or maybe I get some of the other people in the community come help and harvest. But at any rate, once the harvest is in, then I give some of the produce to the people who have helped me. So it's a sort of barter and trade system in that there's no money being exchanged, but there is a cooperation within the community to help each other out to accomplish things. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a given person owning a fucking tractor and a turning plow, or another person owning a till, or some person owning both. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Yes, sure, they're means of production. Yeah, obviously. But it's not the same thing as a factory or a grocery store, which is not really producing anything but just selling stuff. This is not the.
There is a distinction between means of production and capital, actually, and I'm going to bring that up right now. Because historically speaking, what differentiates previous class systems between liberalism's class system, the proletarian, is that previous workers actually did own parts or fully their means of production. That was the difference. Especially guilds. People who worked in guilds often had their own anvils that they owned, and such tools, etc., etc. What makes something capital is the ability to establish a firm and perform wage labor, profitable wage labor, where you can extract service value. That's what makes something private property. That's what makes it capital. But means production on its own is not capital. You still there, Liv?
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at the discussion between you all, because it looks like it's still going on. Is he still actually talking in there while we're streaming?
Barnum kills?
Yeah. I mean, certainly some of this has been going on while we were streaming. I see stuff from like less than an hour ago, where he finally shows up, I guess, and starts in with waiting on your sources. Like, what do we have to do? I mean, we're gonna give him a link to every fucking thing. Just go get the goddamn book. It's not gonna be that expensive. It's in bookstores everywhere, right? But I mean, seriously, if all you've read is the Communist Manifesto, then you don't know what communism is. If all you've read is some, Ayn Rand bitching about communism, you don't know what communism is. If all you've read is, some right-wing or ultra-conservative John Bircher type stuff about communism, then you don't know what communism is. If you want to know what communism is, then you have to read Das Kapital. And if you haven't read Das Kapital and you're trying to criticize communism, then you don't know what you're talking about. Now, again, I am not a communist.
Not just Das Kapital.
Huh?
It's not just Das Kapital.
I mean, this is certainly
there's a whole section of theory.
Right, but this is the very basic thing that you want to read if you want to understand communism. You don't just fucking read the manifesto or someone else criticizing what they think is communism and then regurgitate that to me, because I've heard all that shit before and you're not going to give me anything new, and bullshit, fuck off. But again, let me make plain to the people who happen to be listening for the first time, I am not a Marxist myself. I am a socialist, but not a Marxist socialist. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to let someone get away with making bullshit statements about Marxism any more than I would let them get away with making statements about anything else if they don't know what they're talking about.
I'm actually going to tell you right now, for Marxists, Capital is actually considered advanced reading for people who are seasoned Marxists and seasoned readers of the material. It's much easier and much more common for new Marxists to actually read the early materials of Marx first and the original principles first. The actual economics, reading Capital itself, takes about a year. All 3 volumes of it will take you about a year to read.
Well, I read,
it's not the basics, it is actually, and even there's also more to this as well.
I read the Communist Manifesto and all of Das Kapital when I was an undergraduate, and this was not too long after I had a year-long course in economics. So, I mean, I didn't find it that, you said that it's supposed to be difficult to understand it. I didn't find it difficult to understand.
Did you say you already studied economics at that point?
I had a year-long course in economics at that point, yeah.
Okay, so it'll be a hell of a lot easier for you.
Well, I mean, it was just very, very basic economic class. It wasn't like, some advanced hoo-ha. I mean, whenever I go into a subject that I want to understand, I don't just dive in with no preparation. I want to have a background. So, for example, the very first textbook in comparative mythology ever written was produced in, 1870, I believe. And I read that after I had already gotten, let's see, that would have been after 3 years of philosophy and religion classes, and 2 years of ancient Greek, a year of Latin. At that point, I was still studying Latin, so I had another another bit of Latin to study, but I had already read considerable amounts of Hindu literature and Greek mythology, Norse mythology, Irish texts, Old Irish texts, in English translation at that point, because I hadn't studied Old Irish yet. Portions of the Zindavesta, had a copy of the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Budge translation, a bunch of other stuff I had already, examined, so I wasn't completely ignorant of the subject matter, so that when I read the text itself, which it was written in the 1800s, so it still used Latin and Greek and Hebrew and Sanskrit and things like that, with no translation provided. So if you didn't know what it was, you were kind of up shit creek, right? But yeah, I mean, I didn't read Sanskrit at the time. Fortunately, with that one, he did offer some transliteration, and that usually was good enough to get me to what I wanted to understand. I'd already studied Hebrew a bit at that time as well, and I certainly had access to lexical material, lexical reference materials in both my personal library and the university library.
capital, I'm not sure why you think capital is a key part of understanding communism. I mean, like, it technically is, as in studying its phases, but the theory that actually discusses communism versus capital isn't actually in capital itself. Capital is the analysis of capitalism itself. Issue where you'd want to find out about communism itself and how Marx describes it would be in books like Critique of the Gotha Program, Principles of Communism itself, as in the letter of Principles of Communism, and there's a few more that's escaped my head at the moment. Like, Marx actually describes, for example, the process of shifting from socialism to lower phase communism as well. Like, you are reading your comment saying it's a magical transformation. No, it's Marx predicted that there will be a dramatic increase in industrialization in order to account for the fact it's basically shifting to a different mode of production. It's not just magically done, it's actually specifically with the intention of being able to produce productive capacity so that you do not need to perform commodity exchange anymore to be economically viable to perform certain actions.
No. What I said about magical transformation was has something about how I'm not looking at the comment right now because I've scrolled beyond it, trying to keep my place without jumping around too much. But I said something about the idea that a dictatorship of the proletariat or otherwise would somehow give way to a classless and stateless society. That is what I was talking about in terms of magical thinking, or what I would call pie in the sky by and by when we die type religious stuff.
But that's going to be an interesting discussion, I think, if I've had the opportunity to have it with you. I think it's more connected to dialectical materialism than anything else. But regardless of that, what was I going to say, actually? I can't remember. Sorry about that. Oh, right, yes. Capital is more a discussion of capitalism itself rather than communism. So capital isn't actually the theory you'd want to read to understand the transition to communism. It's what you want to read when you want to understand capitalism. I'm surprised you made that error if you read it.
Well, this is one of the reasons I've said that Marx's criticisms of capitalism were quite right. He was correct what he said about capitalism. He went into great detail explaining why capitalism sucks ass, basically.
Yeah, but he's not, dog here is not going to, or sorry, boredom kills here. Why did I call him dog? Boredom here is not going to get any of those details, the details regarding Marxism that I was talking about from Capital.
I think you might have called him dog because he is a friend of a certain other person we know called Dog of Sinope.
Oh, yes, Dog of Sinope. Now, that's a special character.
I say, the classical Greek pronunciation is Sinope. He says it's pronounced Snoopy, which it obviously is not. But, yeah.
What?
Are you right, you know?
What? There is no pronunciation out there that... There is no pronunciation out there that says Snoopy. What the hell?
Oh, Snoopy, like...
Yeah, exactly, which is why his avatar is an image of Snoopy on top of the doghouse. The accent in classical Greek is on the penult, which is the second from last syllable. So it's over the... I don't know if it's an omicron or an omega at this point. I think it's an omega, so it would be Sinope rather than Sinope or Sinope. And it's there's an iota there. It's not a fucking Hebrew Shiva. No, it does have a syllable there. It's not Snoopy or Sanoopy. It's Sinope. Anyway, yeah, he's a friend of that guy, and that guy is, well, as you know, I mean, you know him, so I don't have to I don't want to talk about the guy behind his back, although I've said everything to his face that I would say about him anyway.
Boredom Kills tried to argue that the Magna Carta was a liberal document.
Oh yeah, I did see that. That was kind of astounding.
And he also tried to present the Athenian democracy as a liberal democracy.
Well, I mean, liberalism didn't even come into existence until after the Enlightenment, right? So, I mean, the Magna Carta was in 1215 or what, right?
I already pointed this out to him.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's actually paying very much attention to what either of us is saying. He just wants to engage in some kind of pissing contest over who can be the most obnoxious or something. I don't really understand this kind of behavior. I've seen it quite a lot. It's one of the reasons I don't do debate, because so many people, especially on the internet, who think they are debating don't even know how to debate. And then, you know, even if they were actually debating, I wouldn't be too interested in it because it's not what I'm into. I mean, there's a reason I like Plato and Socrates and not the sophists, right?
Go ahead.
Actually, I'm about to say, like, you know, the other week on another Discord server, me and Giovanna had like this argument with a Gonzo fan. Like a very huge argument with a Gonzo fan. As in Gonzo Lira.
Oh, Gonzalo. Yeah, Gonzalo Lira. Yeah. I don't even remember what that guy was on about now. He just kept on trying to defend that guy. It was pretty odd.
Yeah, apparently, like, I get, from my understanding, is actually he's a fan. Like, you know, he's a fan of him, and he's trying to defend him, saying that Kraut is a doxer. And of course, I kind of like actually showed like points about. I showed him like the original RT, the RT. Where they interviewed him, like the RT interview, where they actually interviewed him, they showed his face and name, and yeah, the guy is I think the guy was kind of a little insane. Like, it was pretty insane. Like,
yeah, I think he was saying that Kraut had doxed CRP, right? Something like that.
Yes, and also like, see, he kind of like, actually, it was another thing where I actually was trying to make a statement about Christy Winters, and made ref because of a thing, because something happened. Yeah, and then he tried to say because she was jumping in bed with a literal Nazi rapist, and I was talking about JF, and of course the guy said literal Nazi rapist citations.
I mean, come on, like, the guy's a fucking idiot. He's an idiot. I mean, come on, like, right? What did I say? I pointed out to him that Gonzalo had his own address on his Patreon, which was publicly visible. His name is not a secret, as you pointed out. He was on RT several times, using his real name and his face. There was also the video or the live stream or whatever it was, where he did a Google Maps close-up on his own fucking house. You know, on his own channel, he did this. I mean, the guy is not the fucking smartest person in the world, and there's more information about him than is known to the public because it hasn't been released. As well, the person who actually published that information that is released, that wasn't the Kraut, and it wasn't Jeff, as all these alt-writers keep trying to claim. It was Brian, King of Pole. Also known as the Exceptional Detective. He's been on multiple streams from various channels. I think the most recent one was a stream on Vamp Candy's channel, where he has bragged about he was the one who put that info on Kiwi Farms about Coach Red Pill or Gonzalo Lira. But yeah, there may be more coming out about Gonzalo Lira in the future, depending on, you know, I mean, I know some things, but I'm not going to dox anyone, and I don't think this is, I mean, I'm pretty sure this is not public knowledge, so, You know, and I didn't go looking for it either. This was given to me by someone else. But yeah.
Yeah, like, but like thing, like, see, the guy, like, I did like tell the guy citations about my what I said about JF, which is directly the direct court document. I didn't go for the Daily Beast article. I went directly to the court document, and then he dismissed it. Yeah, the guy kind of like, this guy is kind of like insane and ideologically sucking JF and CRP's dick.
Yeah, right. I remember this thing about the court case where there was something about counselor, and I was pointing out to him that there were two people involved in the case. In the documents, it refers to not only the counselor who was hired by the family of the girl, it also talks about the court-appointed psychiatrist. And a psychiatrist is a person with a medical doctorate. It's not someone who learned how to do psychotherapy. It's not a psychologist. It's a psychiatrist, a person who can prescribe medication for your schizophrenia and stuff like that. And that guy, the court-appointed psychiatrist, is the one who gave his assessment of the girl's competence. It wasn't the family's hired counselor, as they have tried to claim. And then he was calling the psychiatrist a counselor as well. And I'm like, no. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that guy probably need to see a psychiatrist, like. Yeah, like, because I think he's actually, or maybe like a cult counselor. Like, he definitely needs to be deprogrammed. Like, because that might sound like a cultist. Like,
I honestly don't know if all these people are what you might call brainwashed or whatever. I think a lot of them have the same issue that very partisan members of political parties have, which is kind of, you know, this is my team and I'm going to support them no matter what. I've talked about this before on the, well, it wasn't on the Progressive Flame, it was in response to someone else somewhere on Medium, and I don't remember if it were on one of my own articles or someone else's, that I had said I have likened partisan politics to sports fandom for a long time. And I gave the example of the Dallas Cowboys, which I regard as my home team, okay? And I'm always going to be a Dallas Cowboys girl because they're my home team. And, you know, I was there in the years 92 to 94 when they won the Super Bowl twice in a row. I was, you know, then they came back a year after, let's see, it was 93 and 94 they won. And then they didn't win in 95, and they came back in 96 and won again. I mean, that was the dream team. That was what everybody was calling America's team. That was when they had Emmitt Smith and Troy Aikman and the coach, of course. And so they were really a very good and impressive team. I remember going out on my balcony from my apartment and looking towards Texas Stadium, which was at the time the home stadium of the Cowboys, and seeing the fireworks going off after they won that Super Bowl in 1993. I saw some guy walking up the sidewalk from that direction, and he saw me up on the balcony. I'm standing up there with, I don't know what I was drinking at the time, some kind of alcohol I was drinking. And he yells out, "Number 1!" And I go, "Dallas Cowboys," yelled back at him. And I'm surprised I remember even that much, because I was really fucking plastered that night. Oh my god. But, yeah, but I know that the Dallas Cowboys, ever since then, have not been the same team as they were then. For one thing, they don't have the same players, they don't have the same coach, but not just that, they're not performing as well as they did back then. Now, last year, I think they came close. They came closer than they have in a while, but they didn't quite make it. So, But even during the time that they sucked, and they did suck for a while, they were still my team because they were my team, period. There's no explanation for it. It's not a rational thing, you know, and I think this is a thing that you see a lot with partisan party members, political party members, that you've seen it recently with, say, the stuff in North Korea. Okay, so like you've got on Fox News, you've got the same people who just a few years ago were losing their shit over the idea that Obama would go and talk to the North Korean leader. And now the same people are like, woo, Trump, peace, woo, Trump, peace in North Korea, woo. You know, they're cheerleaders, basically. And they're cheerleaders for their team. And they're going to also, you know, rag on the other team. And you get the same thing with MSNBC. If you have someone now that's talking about what a horrible thing this is, that Trump is going and talking to this horrible dictator, it must have something to do with Russia. Russia wants him to do this. I'm not joking. This is actually something that Rachel Madcow said. She developed this really bizarre conspiracy theory on air. For like in her show, like an hour of her show, right? Her show lasts an hour and probably 40 minutes, if not more, of it she spends talking about Trump and Russia, or, you know, Trump or Russia. And this has been going on since, you know, January of last year, right? It's, you know, people talk about Trump derangement syndrome, and it's there. It's a real thing. And so is Hillary derangement syndrome. People just lose their fucking shit over these two personalities. And we can also talk about cult of personality, right? There's that aspect to it as well. But I think it's a lot to do. I mean, there will be people who will call this tribalism, but I think that does a great disservice to what tribalism actually is, and it's based on modern sociological horseshit about what tribalism was in, you know, in the past. But I prefer to compare it more to sectarianism, religious sectarianism, because that's what it is more like. You have my religion, my church is the right one, and all these other people, yeah, they're kind of okay, but they're wrong, you know. Or you've got those other people in that church, they're fucking lunatics, they're wrong, they're going to hell. And it's shit like that, you know. And then you've got them, oh, well, those guys over there, oh, yeah, they're in a cult. Never mind that it's the oldest fucking Christian sect in the world, right? But they're a cult because they're not in my sect, and they have all these different weird practices and rituals and statues and blah, 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 you know. So you've got that kind of weird shit that goes on where you have these two teams which are in competition with each other. And it doesn't matter if they're doing exactly the same goddamn fucking thing. It's that they have a different team jersey with a different color and a different logo and a different name. So, yeah, I'm wearing a blue jersey with a D on it, and I've got a big jackass on top of my head. So I'm a Democrat. Woo! Oh, I'm wearing a red jersey with a big R on it, and I've got an elephant on top of my head. Woo! I'm a Republican. You know, this kind of stuff. They've got all the trappings of a sports team fandom as well. Like these logos, these names, these, you know, all this shit. These colors, even. And so now we see this translating not just, it's not just political parties or religious sects, it's also translating into ideological perspectives now as well. So you have the alt-right group, and anybody who's against them must be a communist and Antifa and blah, 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 blah. Never mind the fact that I know several Marxists who are not down with Antifa. I know many socialists who aren't Marxists who aren't down with Antifa. I mean, they call these people progressive, and I'm like, yeah, you haven't actually talked to modern progressives. And by modern progressive, I mean those people who became distinct about 46, 47, 48, 1948 is when they formed the most recent political party to bear the name Progressive Party. Now, there are some which have sprung up in the past year and a half or so, which have progressive as either the name of the party or part of the name of the party. So we have a new progressive party that's called Progressive Party. We have Progressive Independent Party. We have New Progressive Party. We have Bull Moose Progressive Party. We've got a bunch of other things that are calling themselves Progressive Party. And but when I talk about modern progressives, I'm talking about the current that basically matured out of historical progressivism, which started in 1891 or so, with the foundation of the Populist Party or the People's Party, and then, moved through that populist era of the 1890s into the first decade of the 20th century. So you had, say, Teddy Roosevelt, who started the Progressive Party in 1912. You had Robert M. La Follette Sr., who started another Progressive Party in 1924. I think there was one in between there, too. I think there was something in, like, 1916, but it didn't even rate much mention in historical footnotes, really. But the one in 1912 that was started by Teddy Roosevelt, that's the one everyone knows about. The one that was started by La Follette in 1924 isn't nearly as well known, but it's more well known than the other one. And then the last one was started by Henry Wallace, which was Franklin Roosevelt's second vice president, and he started in 1948. That would be whenever they began to become distinct. Whereas in the past, before World War II, progressive was such a vague term. It applied to anyone. Anyone could call themselves a progressive, because the only real central idea of progressivism at the time was reform. And reform is a very subjective thing. It can mean different stuff to different people. Depending on who you talk to, what might be seen as reform might be entirely the opposite of what someone else might see as reform. So in 1948, 1912 platform of Roosevelt's party, Teddy Roosevelt's party, was, it wasn't just reform. It had some specific planks in the platform, including National Health Service. So we've been trying to get a national health care thing going on for over 100 years now, and we still get the liberals, the Democrats, saying, well, incrementalism, which is the same thing they were saying in the 60s about civil rights, only then they were calling it gradualism, how gradually does it have to come about? How incrementally do we have to get to it? It's not like we haven't been talking about it for over 100 years now. But, okay, so the National Health Service thing was left out of the 1924 platform, that party that was started by La Follette. And then in 1948, it was back again and more explicitly talking about universal health care, which Roosevelt had also talked about in what he called the Second Bill of Rights. Wallace, the guy that started the party in 1948 and ran for president that year, on their ticket had the endorsement of the Communist Party of the USA, whereas La Follette had the endorsement of the Socialist Party of America. Wallace was calling for an end to the Cold War. He was calling for some kind of repair of the relations between the Soviet Union and the U.S. and so forth. And he seemed to be somewhat pro-communist, somewhat pro-Marxist. And then in 1952, he changed his tune on that with having met a guy called Petrov, who had informed him of what was going on in the Soviet Union under Stalin. And he decided that wasn't such a cool thing after all. So from that point on, progressives have tended to be some kind of socialist, but not Marxist. But that's an economic thing, and progressivism isn't an economic thing. It's just that most progressives do tend to be some kind of leftist, but not Marxist. And then along come the Democrats after the 1988 election, when they've allowed the Republicans to turn the word liberal into a slur throughout the 1980s and haven't had spine enough to defend it. So they started calling themselves progressives. Not all of them, of course, but a few. A few of the social liberals who actually had come into existence around the same time as the modern progressives, around the end of World War II. And why they thought they could call themselves progressives as a, co-opt that label as their new rebranded image, I don't know, because progressives and liberals have had rather famous battles, one of the most well-known of which was over the Vietnam War. Modern progressives opposed it, and social liberals supported it. So there is a long history of being anti-war in the progressive movement as well. So those people, the partisan Democrats, the social liberal rebranded as progressives, those are people I call faux-gressives, fake progressives. And then you had in the late 90s, you had a group of, I don't really know where they came from, but I think they were people who were inspired by postmodernism and post-structuralism, and they started getting interested in politics and things like that, or mostly social issues. So they got interested and involved with the political correctness movement in America at the time, and by 2003, they had redefined it, and successfully so, to the point that anyone who disagreed with even a part of their idea of political correctness, anyone who offered any constructive criticism of their scheme of political correctness, anyone sometimes who even asked sincere questions about their ideas, could be branded as a sexist and a racist and a homophobe. Now, they didn't have chauvinist and misogynist and transphobe and all this other stuff that they've added since, but these were early days yet. And a lot of them had come out of the Democratic Party, or were still part of the Democratic Party. And so they had that influence there. So the idea of calling themselves progressives began to present itself to them. By 2012, they had already co-opted language of social justice and started using that more than they were using political correctness. And it was basically the same thing they were talking about all along. It was, I'm pissed off because you're having fun. It was neo-Puritan self-righteous busybodyism. And they started getting interested in feminism. They started misapplying the original concept of intersectionality, which had been come up with by Kimberly Crenshaw. When Kimberly Crenshaw was talking about intersectionality, she wasn't talking about identity politics. She wasn't talking about a focus on identities. She was talking about structures. Well, people who are influenced by post-structuralism, as I said earlier, do I even have to explain why they wouldn't want to focus on structures? Right? I mean, it's even in the name, right? Post-structuralism. And this is, in some sense, it's about literary criticism and art criticism and things like that. Structuralism was a type of criticism of art and literature. But because post-structuralism isn't just about art and literature and so forth, but also has become a philosophy. I mean, one of the early leaders of the post-structuralist movement was Jacques Derrida, who was a metaphysical nominalist. Basically, there's no such thing as universal qualities or whatever. Those are just names we give to things, which is even more ridiculous than, well, I shouldn't say ridiculous, but it's even more extreme than Aristotle's position on universals. And I say this as someone very heavily influenced by Plato's ideas on universals. I don't know that I believe that there is some transcendent world off somewhere where, the world of forms or whatever. I don't know about that, but obviously I think that universals do have an independent objective existence, and by independent I mean independent of the particulars in which they inhere. You know, what is it about this oak and that oak that make them both oaks, even though one of them is a pin oak and one of them is a live oak, or one of them is a southern red oak and one of them is a Spanish oak, one of them is a scarlet oak, one of them is a white oak. What about all of these makes them an oak? Well, it's the form of oakness. They all share this particular quality, and it's like, it's not identical in each case, not just because they're different trees, but because they're different species of the same genus. But it is a genus that actually exists, and it exists whether they do or not. If the entire genus of Quercus were suddenly eradicated from the earth, it wouldn't make Quercus stop being real. It would stop existing maybe, but it wouldn't stop being a thing in terms of essence, in terms of the form, the universal.
Good.
Yeah.
I have to go.
Oh,
Have a good night.
I've been on an
Good night.
extended rant here about stuff. But anyway, yeah, good night, dream well, and thanks for coming on.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on. Try to have it there, would you?
I mean, I can try, we'll see, but I don't know. So I'll go ahead and say Oi Chava.
Songafal Mash Colleen.
So I mean, so you got this postmodernist, post-structuralist, inspired and partisan Democrat loyalist, basically, group who isn't quite the same as the Democratic Party establishment, and they've got these ideas that they've picked up from postmodernism and post-structuralism and generic social liberalism and Democratic Party hoo-ha, and feminism, which they've begun to distort into something else, and intersectionality, which they're misapplying and misunderstanding, or both, and social justice, which they don't understand and they've just taken the language of to try to use to beat people over the head with. Much like they were using the term political correctness to beat people over the head with a few years earlier. So by 2012, they had kind of coalesced into a new sort of thought current or movement, and that's where you get people calling them social justice warriors. That's where they came into existence, really, as a distinct, sort of loosely organized, if at all, organized group or movement. And so, because they had this influence from the Democratic Party, they also, some of them, have called themselves progressives. But when they're trying to undo things that second-wave feminists got done and have fought long and hard for several decades, when they're trying to promote segregation, which progressives and liberals cooperated to end, and which, you know, averted the race war we were probably going to have if it hadn't ended. I mean, they're trying to undo progress, really. And so what other name is appropriate for them than regressive? So, you know, I mean, I think that term, as I've said before, was probably coined by someone on the right wing or conservative, ultra-conservative, whatever. But it's a very accurate designation for these people, regressives. I generally call them outrage mongers. This is a term I got from my friend Nick, you know, Wizard of Cause. As we were talking about this one time, and I was like, I don't like to call them social justice warriors because they don't give a fuck about social justice, you know? And he says, well, why don't... and I said, I'd seen Liana Kersner talking about the same group of people and referring to them as outrage warriors. And he said, well, what about outrage mongers? That's what I like to call them. And I was like, you know, that is a good name. That's a better name, I think. So I'm going to start using that. And he says, great, you know, or whatever. I don't remember exactly what he said, but he had no problem with me using it anyway. And I mean, he had suggested it, so yeah. But, you know, I think if I were to give them a complete and accurate and precise name, I would probably call them something like post-structuralist and postmodernist inspired democratic partisan outrage monger. Neo-Puritan probably would be tossed into there somewhere too, or, you know, because they're just miserable fucking people who can't stand the idea of anyone else having fun, especially if that anyone else happens to be cisgender and or heterosexual and or white and or male. You know, I mean, if they want to talk about, you know, if they want to measure their oppression Olympics penis against mine, I don't talk about these so-called identities that I have very much, but as I said earlier, I'm of mixed ethnicities. I'm a woman. I'm bisexual. I follow a very minority sacred tradition. I'm disabled. I mean, there's a bunch of other stuff I can, you know, I don't think they want to get into the you know, who's more oppressed between me and them, because if we want to get down to brass tacks, I can list a bunch of fucking identities that would supposedly make me oppressed. And I think I would come out higher on their so-called progressive stack than they would, most of them, because most of them are, you know, middle-class white women who've been, you know, not particularly oppressed in their lives and are in good, you know, physical health and stuff like that. I don't know about their mental health, but, oh yeah, that's another term I use sometimes, is neurotics. Fragile neurotics. Nick has another term, I can't remember what it was, screeching, what did he call them? Screeching, fuck, I can't remember. Screeching Queens of Outrage or something like that, I don't know.
Yeah, like he's actually quite an interesting person. Like, of course, I think like I'm guessing he's pretty busy in real life, from what I heard. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, he's a writer, and he's running for his political office, state office. He does his own, I mean, he has his own YouTube channel too, and he does the show with Jeff twice a week. And, you know, he's got a daughter and all kinds of other nifty stuff to keep him occupied. He did graciously come on my channel and let me interview him when the channel was still quite small. When I talked with him about the Occupy movement and Gamergate and let's see, what else did I talk? There were three main topics, and I can't remember now what the other one was. And then it was around the time of that CoxCon business with the "Are Traps Gay?" question. So that, of course, someone in the chat asked that question when I opened it up for questions, and so we did discuss that briefly as well. But yeah, he did come on for an interview one time, which was really nice. I mean, I go on his Patron streams sometimes, and I've been on Midweek Saints a few times as a guest. Not as a main guest, right? But like when they start bringing people in from the Discord and stuff near the end.
yeah, like I think maybe usually I'm quite busy when the midweek Saints come on, but I think I've actually been on to once on Twitch, and well, on the Twitch chat anyway, like.
Yeah, the Midweek Saints is the one they do on Twitch, and then YouTube Saints is the one they do later in the night on Sundays. So, I mean, there are often times when I sleep through Midweek Saints because I've stayed up too late into the day and wind up passing out. I mean, like yesterday, for example, Thursday. I don't know what time it was when I finally passed out, but I had seen that there was another update on Windows, so it was going to be, I was going to have to update whenever I restarted, and at the time I had run out of all drinks except water and coffee, so you can guess that I was drinking a lot of coffee. So somehow I got it in my head that I had to do all this shit before I finally, you know, went ahead and updated, because I didn't know how long it was going to take after the last update that took hours and hours and hours to finally finish. So I stayed up far too late, and I didn't actually voluntarily go to sleep. I just passed out here at the computer. Fortunately, I didn't fall asleep on the keyboard or the mouse or anything, but I think I just pushed it aside somehow, and I may have just laid my head down for a minute to rest or something and wound up falling asleep. Yeah. Anyway, so that probably wasn't too long before they started the show that evening, and so I wasn't awake. I didn't wake up until after midnight. So, but you know, if I miss one of their shows, I always watch it later, because you know they do upload the midweek ones to YouTube, because like I do with these streams, I can record them as well as stream them, and Jeff does that with with Midweek Saints, so that once they have done the stream, they can like immediately upload the recorded version of it, the local recorded version. And, you know, there are times also when I miss Sunday night YouTube Saints, but I usually watch that live. There's a pre-show for that was done by Wafflethorpe and Jables Boogley, and now it's Wafflethorpe and I think it's Lord Rimshey, if I recall correctly. I don't know if Wafflethorpe is coming back or not. At first it was said that he was just he had to take a break for some reason. And more recently I was told by Jables that he doesn't know if Waffles is going to come back, because Waffle had said that he wasn't enjoying doing the show as much as he had when they first started. So we'll see, I guess. So I mean, they do their pre-show for the Saints on Sundays, and then there's a guy called Calligator who does an after show on both Thursdays and Sundays on Twitch. The Lesser Saints of Discord, which is the pre-show on Sunday, is on YouTube. If you haven't seen it, I can recommend check it out a little bit. Some of the stuff is quite interesting, some of it maybe not so much. They talk about different things, kind of like we do here. So, you know, depending on who they have as a guest, they may be talking about something you find interesting, or they may be talking about something you're not that interested in. But, you know, sometimes I do manage to sleep through that too, unfortunately, especially in the summer here, now that we are, it's so fucking hot. I just wind up lying down and trying to stay, you know, inactive so that I don't build up any extra body heat.
Yeah. Is your computer running okay right now?
Well, I mean, I've had green on the stream health for quite some time now. I think it may have disconnected us at one point, and then it immediately started back up, so I don't know if that's going to be the same stream video or not, and I haven't looked at my video list on my channel, so I don't know. It says we've been going for 3 hours. Oh, we have. It's 9 o'clock, so it's been about 3 hours. We started just after 9. But yeah, I've got everything seems green here on YouTube. It says everything is copacetic, so to speak. Let me see if I'm going to take a look at the video list. No, it just has this one and says live now. So I mean, let me Now, the time that it did that one freak out thing where it stopped the video right after we started. I mean, it lasted for like 5 minutes or something, and then it was gone. That particular first bit of that stream is still processing to this day, and it's been like 3 weeks now, I guess, 2 or 3 weeks. Let me see. Yeah, it's still processing. I have no idea how long it is. And that was from June the 1st. It says it streamed at 7:03, so it would have ended like 3 minutes after we started it. And that was the night that everybody was having trouble on YouTube with their streams, because, like, you know, Bobby was in the live chat and he was hopping around between different people streaming, and he said they were all having trouble. But then the other one, the one that we actually did that night, where you and I talked about Romulans and Star Trek Online, that went on for almost 4 hours. It actually was the longest video, I mean the longest stream I've done to date, which it beat the previous record holder by like 2 minutes. The one before was Operation Midnight Climax, where we had the drawn out discussion of, I'll say discussion because it wasn't quite a debate, because I wasn't debating, and while some of the other people in there thought maybe that might have thought they were debating, they weren't really debating either. That one lasted 3 hours, 46 minutes, and 44 seconds, and then the one, You Don't Have Nixon to Kick Around Anymore, that was 3 hours, 47 minutes and 20 seconds, so a little more than a minute longer than the previous record holder. And you know, it was constantly buffering throughout the entire stream until I guess probably the last hour and a half when it began to behave properly, I guess. So, and you know, there was a little brief that brief 3 minutes or whatever before that. It's still processing, but the one that I did where we broke it actually broke up into 4 different videos because it kept disconnecting that night. All of those videos have finished processing, and I took the local recorded video and uploaded it all as a full video, and I tried to cut out the intro music, which went on for 17 minutes or something. But I failed to do that because my encoder or my video editor somehow omitted the sound from the entire thing. So I don't know what that was about. So I just decided, fuck it, I'll just upload it as it is. And it was like about twice the size it would have been if I'd been able to do the edit on my encoder that I was trying to do, because I had, used a different compression on it. And also because I had cut out, 17 minutes of it. So that would have made it just a little more than, it would have been just a little more than 2 hours. It would have been about 2 hours and 30 minutes or so. Not quite 2 hours and 30 minutes. Anyway, yeah, you can tell I haven't had any sleep because I tended to babble more.
Yeah.
I do this on pain medicine and some types of alcohol as well. So, yeah. I don't know. Did you want to talk about anything else? I know you want to talk about maybe the new expansion in STO. I haven't played all the missions, so yeah, no spoilers or anything. But I will say that the mission where you go through to the Gamma Quadrant and you find that prison planet or whatever, and you find Kai Opaka, I was a bit disappointed that Kira decided to step down as Kai after that, at the end of that, because she said that Opaka wanted to go back into the Gamma Quadrant and establish a temple there, and I was thinking, Why can't you have two Kais, one in the Gamma Quadrant and one over here on this side of the wormhole? And I was even more disappointed when she said she was gonna join Starfleet, because like the Bajorans have their militia and they have space vessels, spacefaring vessels. We have one ourselves, which was recently given out, that Bajoran Interceptor.
Yes, like I'm thinking because like I think the Bajoran militia is more like local defense, and while Starfleet actually goes out further in space. So I think that's, and also I'm thinking like I think there was actually a fiction blog where it was mentioned that Kara never really wanted to be Kai, but she took it anyway because there's no one else she could trust with the job. And seeing that the previous Kai was basically the Bajoran version of Rodrigo Borgia, then yeah, I can kind of understand her feelings about that.
I hated that woman. I hated her. What was her name? Wynn.
Kai
Wynn. Oh my god, horrible. She was.
I know, like.
I think she was the same actress that played Nurse Ratched in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Oh my god. If that woman, the actress, isn't completely evil herself, she's a damn good actress, because both of those characters were like, ugh,
Yeah, like. Yeah, I kind of like compared her to Rodrigo Borgia because like, well, he did actually murder people to get to the top. So
yeah.
Like,
but
and also, but I'm thinking like seeing like when you look at Kara's history, like you can kind of get more impression of she's more like a warrior or soldier type of person than any kind of spiritual leader.
Yeah, I mean, certainly she was part of the Bajoran resistance and all that stuff, and had been the XO on Deep Space Nine when Sisko was in charge there. And then after he went to become the modern version of the two guys who, Lazarus, right, from the original series, where they get into the doorway threshold of that little space-time dimension vessel, whatever it was, and are trapped forever in a battle with each other, right? That was interesting. But she became the commander of Deep Space Nine after that, right? It's actually in the Path to 2409 where it talks about her becoming Kai. So it's not something from hard canon. I don't remember exactly what the specifics were in the Path to 2409, because mostly what I focused on when I was studying that in depth was the stuff pertaining to the Romulans, because I was using it as a source for my What Are We, or What We Are, or yeah, I think it's called What Are We. The thing that I wrote that is a discussion of Romulan history and culture. I tried to make it the most comprehensive discussion of Romulan history and culture to date, but also to keep it consistent with itself. And I had to, jump out of hard canon into soft canon a few times. The novels, the Rihansu saga, or Bloodwing saga, as it's now called, that was written by Diane Duane and what's his name? Anyway, that was certainly a part of the source material for Legacy of Romulus in game, so it obviously had to have some kind of inclusion in my work. And then I wanted to kind of give a history of the character who had been the Romulan commander in the Enterprise incident, and what she had done since that episode. So I relied on Price of the Phoenix, The Fate of the Phoenix. Those are two novels. There's also reference to her, of course, in Diane Duane's work, the Rihansu story, as well as in her her story about that's about Vulcan, the planet Vulcan. And then there is another text. What the fuck is it called? Another novel that includes the same character. Anyway, there's one of the novels that gives, I think it's Price of the Phoenix, gives her the name Dion Charvon, and then so that would be repeated in Fate of the Phoenix, and then the next one that gives her a name is the one that the name I can't remember right now, gives her the name Liviana Charvanek. And then using Romulan naming conventions as established by Diane Duane with her creation of the Rihan language, it would be either Dion Ticharvon or Liviana Ticharvanek. So I had to explain the difference in the names. And then there's another story where she has become the Praetor of the Romulan Star Empire, and her name is Thea, Praetor Thea. So I had to explain the differences in the names, and of course one of these stories she winds up marrying Dvoras Trenarviat, who became the Praetor while Shiarkiek was the emperor, and Shiarkiek, according to this story, was her uncle. And then you've got the Diane Duane stories where Ael becomes the Empress, and she, according to those stories, was the aunt of this character. So they're very contradictory, or at least inconsistent on the face of it, elements of her story from various places. And I wanted to try to harmonize them a bit and make them somewhat consistent, so that inconsistency bugs me. Now, a false consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, as it has been said, but actual consistency is something that's very important, especially for a someone who is not exactly an empirical rationalist, but pretty close, like myself. Because rationalism's view of truth is that which coheres with reality and is internally or self-referentially consistent. If something be true, then it must be consistent with anything else which is true. You don't have contradictions, because a self-contradiction, is a necessary falsehood. So you don't have contradictions in truth. In fact, if you encounter a contradiction in an argument, well, say, you know that one or more of the premises must be false. So, anyway, I wanted to kind of have it make sense, even for people who aren't as concerned about consistency, or what they call continuity in television series and so forth, as I am. And to have this woman with like 3 different names and no explanation of why, and 3 different stories and all this other kind of stuff, I was like, yep, well, I'm gonna have to do something to kind of pin this down to one particular story, and I'm gonna bring in elements of all of these, but I'm obviously not going to use any one of them exclusively or even primarily. So that's what I did with that. And the same thing as far as the beginnings of the Romulans. There are, you've got the thing from Last Unicorn Games, where it talks about Tellus and the children of Ketcheleb, the way of Dera, all that stuff. You've got the thing from FASA role-playing game, where the Romulans were created by the Preservers. You've got the thing from and right there on Romulus, they didn't come from Vulcan. You've got the thing, obviously, from the original series, where it's heavily implied, if not directly stated, that they are of the same origin as the Vulcans, and you certainly see that they have some things that they understand between the cultures in terms of touch telepathy in the famous hand sex that went on between the Romulan commander and Spock in the Enterprise incident. You know, where the Spock makes the Vulcan salute, you know, and she brings up her hand in the same salute, and they touch hands and then start getting hot and heavy. So there's that. And it certainly seems like it was always intended that they were Vulcans who left Vulcan at some point. And then you've got Diane Duane's story about Satask and those people who left Romulus. So I just said, okay, well, fuck it. You know, there were people who left with Tellus, and there were people who left with Satask, and they met somewhere en route and joined up and continued as one group, you know. So, I mean, there was not that much of a hassle there. Okay, sure, you can have Tellus and you can have Satask, but they came together at some point and became, you know, the same fleet or whatever, going still in search of a new homeworld. And then there were various other things, but certainly the Path to 2409 was one of the texts that I had to kind of stick pretty closely to, because what I was writing was intended to be for the situation in Star Trek Online. Now that we have had that Yesterday's War, or Tomorrow's War, or whatever it's called, Yesterday's War, yeah? That chapter in the storyline, and the Crinum business and all that shit. I'm not as interested in following the storyline in Star Trek Online as closely and faithfully anymore, because there's all this shit about how the Klingons and the Romulans and everybody else is going to join together in one big happy federation and sit around the campfire and sing Kumbaya until what's-his-fuck shows up with his little goatee and says, "Fuck you all, I'm going to end your tyranny," and start shooting, you know. But yeah, so I mean, I don't buy that. I don't think that it makes any sense. And this whole one world government, blah blah blah. No, man. I mean, if there's one fucking option, then there's no alternative. So if that one fucking option should happen to become tyrannical, then you don't have any place you can go, you know, to seek refugee status or sanctuary or whatever you want to call it. There's no escape. You're stuck there, and you have to put up with it or try to start a revolution and die, probably, because by that point everyone would be disarmed and only the government and criminals would have weapons like that. Not that revolution, even now, is a possible... I mean, it's not an option. We've got not only the military with their tanks and bombers and attack helicopters and all this other shit, and flamethrowers and bazookas and tactical nukes, but you've also got an increasingly militarized police force with body armor and armored personnel carriers and automatic weapons and all kinds of them. And it's not fully automatic. They're just like the military. They're pulse automatic weapons. So you pull the trigger and it fires 3 rounds, and then you pull the trigger again and it fires 3 rounds. That's done to keep the barrel from melting, basically. I mean, if you were to just take an AR-15 or M16 and go fully automatic with it, it would probably melt the barrel pretty quickly, because the rounds passing through the barrel would heat it up to the point that the metal would begin to warp and it wouldn't be accurate anymore as the barrel begins to droop, alright, bend in the middle, and yeah. Anyway, so I mean, this is one of the things that I was talking about earlier today in various places, including in the Discord, is that I don't support literal, physical, violent revolution. The revolution that I support is a revolution of ideas, winning the hearts and minds, so to speak, of people by language, by talking about the things that you stand for, but also by living you know, setting that example. It's not just talking the talk, it's also walking the walk. One of the people that I was interacting with on YouTube comments earlier today was like, well, you're trying to say all this shit now, but you did all this shit back then. And I'm like, no, I actually didn't. I've been saying all this shit for over 25 years now. I was opposed to all the shit you're talking about and trying to blame me for doing. You don't know me. But I mean, I've got a history on the internet that goes back a while. Go look. You know, you can find me talking about stuff as far back as 2012, maybe a little earlier. If you dig around enough, you might find stuff going back to 1999, but I doubt it, because I think most of those websites are long gone. And I didn't really talk about politics much on the internet before then. But yeah, I do have a history of being pretty much what I am right now, going back for some time. And I mean, he's trying to basically blame me for all the shits that all the shit that the Democrats have done, and I'm like, and I'm not a Democrat. I've never been a member of the Democratic Party. You know, I mean, if you want to say that because I paid dues to the Democratic National Committee one fucking time in my life, that I was a member of the Democratic Party at that, you know, for that 1 year, maybe, but I wasn't registered as a Democrat. I never have been. The only party affiliation, membership, whatever, that I have ever actively sought. I mean, I did have, honestly, I had Republican on my voter registration the first time I registered, but that wasn't true within a year and a half after that. So, yeah, that didn't last very long. And that was just, I was a kid. My parents were Republicans, and so I thought I was too, and I found out that I wasn't. And the only other party I've ever joined is the Green Party, and I didn't join them until 2016, but I've been voting Green, not consistently, but pretty much, since 1994 or 1996. Certainly in 1996 I voted for Ralph Nader, who was a Green Party candidate for president. And I've voted for Greens since then as well. I haven't always voted for Greens. I mean, we have local elections here. There are no Greens running for any offices. So I don't have the option to vote for a Green there. But yeah, I've been greenish at least since the mid-90s. And we're talking 25 years ago, right? So trying to blame me for the shit that the Democrats have done, hey, back the fuck up, motherfucker, because that's not my shit at all. You can blame someone else for that. That's not what I've done. I've fought against it. Anyway, once again, I'm babbling. I'm taking up all the...
Yeah. Like, actually, I was about to say about, like, Caribbean Kai. I believe there was actually an episode where Cisco, for whatever reason, was jumping into future, and he saw like this like alternate future that also included like Kara becoming Kai. So there is some basis in canon, though that is technically an alternate future. So
yeah, well, I mean, as much time travel as goes on in hard canon, who's to say what is alternate and what isn't anymore? That's one of the things that I talked about in, you know, that link that I did. I don't know if you read that or not, but I did post the link in our last little, in that you don't have Nixon to kick around anymore. It's in the video description there. My discussion about temporal mechanics. And one of the things that I was trying to point out was that just because the Federation's temporal agents have fucked around with the timeline, trying to preserve what they think is the prime timeline, it doesn't mean it's the prime timeline. It just means it's the prime timeline for them. And if they want to impose it on the rest of us, I'm not down with that. I mean, we've got temporal intelligence in the Taldeon as well, and we've got temporal science division as well. So we're going to do what we do, and we're going to work toward the future that is from the, that we're going to work for the prime timeline that my character has seen, which is with the Romulan Republic, still the Romulan Republic, and not a vassal state, so to speak, of the Federation. So, I mean, what else? Is there anything else you wanted to say about the new expansion? I know you're playing Cardassian, aren't you? Or are you a Jem'Hadar? What?
Oh, actually, the Cardassians are available to races available for Federation and KDF, and of course, I made a Jem'Hadar character. The other day, I actually posted like a Let's Play where I actually recorded on launch day. Yeah, I play a Jem'Hadar I created a Jem'Hadar Vanguard named Goliath.
Yes, you have told me about Goliath, and I did see that you had uploaded that Let's Play, but I haven't watched it yet.
Yes, and of course, I kind of like then I realized I did make a mistake. I referred to Aaron Eisenberg as Jesse Eisenberg. Yeah, and
Nog.
see, that was kind of
Nog.
And Nog, yeah, yes, Actually, no, that was actually going to be in the next video, but actually, I recorded all of them. I still need to just edit them, but in the next one, I wonder if I should like edit it out or that part out or it will just seem a little choppy though, But basically,
so, let me ask you a question. What do you use to record a gameplay video in Star Trek Online?
OBS.
Okay, because I've used OBS, and that's where I get all the little green patches that interfere. They just appear out of nowhere in the video. I don't understand what they're doing there.
Could be like maybe there's something different with your system, like.
Well, I mean, I have NVIDIA, whatever the fuck it is, GeForce or whatever. I've got Intel something here. I can't read this in the dark. I mean, it's a new computer. I just got it last year. Or it's an Asus computer. I bought it specifically to be a gaming rig. So, I mean, I don't think it's the computer. It might be my connection, but I don't know. And what do you use to edit your videos with?
Oh, I found the program called OpenShot.
OpenShot?
Yeah, it's like one of those like shareware programs, and it works okay as video editing.
So I have OBS Studio. Obviously, we're on OBS right now. I'm streaming through OBS Discord overlay for OBS Studio. I also have the program I do most of my videos on now. I mean, I did start off doing them on OBS, but it's not quite as user-friendly, in my opinion, as an encoder and video producer as the one that my boyfriend uses, which I have now as well, which is Vegas Movie Studio Platinum. But I've been having a lot of trouble with the size of the files. They seem to be enormous at times. I mean, I had one that was like it was like a 30-minute long video, and it was over a gig. And I'm like, I've messed with the settings on that to make it a smaller sized video, and I did some good, but I don't know. I think I wanted to look into maybe getting something else, especially something that would be easier to do editing with, because with the Vegas studio, you basically adjust the end time and starting time of any given video clip. And yeah, I don't really want to do that. I want to be able to cut parts out, right? Out of the middle or whatever, and things like that. So I'm not really sure what I'm looking for, but I'd like to find something that's a little easier to use just for editing, and then I can toss it back into Vegas and continue doing whatever I'm doing there. Because with Vegas I can take an already made MP4 file and put it in there as the video, and then I can ungroup it from the audio file that's part of it. I mean, I can remove the audio track entirely from the video, or I can just leave the video. I can leave the audio and take the video part of it out, and all kinds of stuff like that. But as far as editing the video itself, once it's a video, that's a little more in-depth, and it would require me taking the same video and editing it multiple times and then putting together the finished product, or the finished products into one product. And that seems like a hell of a lot of work. I mean, the first time I made a video with Vegas, it took me like 10.5 hours. And the video was, I think, less than an hour long. I think it was about 45 minutes long. I'm not sure now. But anyway, it seemed like a lot of work, a lot of time spent to do something that wasn't really that long. And I mean, I'm counting in part of that 10.5 hours me figuring out how to use the program too. So that's kind of, I don't think that counts for what I do now. But like, if I wanted to give the full time that I spent on it, it probably would have been more like 15 hours, because there was also the time that I spent in research and writing a script and getting the images that I wanted to use and stuff like that, and arranging them and whatever. But yeah.
Yeah.
So, what can you tell me about this Jem'Hadar faction and the Jem'Hadar species? Is there anything new and different and exciting about them?
Well, they have the initial fallibility. They have the racial fallibility, and also you can get a buff from using Ketracel White.
Oh,
The
so you get a buff from it instead of developing Ketracel poisoning, huh?
Yeah, like, see, like in a lot of races, it's a debuff, but you get a buff from it, and also, like, of course, like what makes the Vanguard special is because, well, there are traits that enhance their abilities in combat also applies to space. Like, see, there's two variants. Like, there's the free one, where it's just the basic Jem'Hadar soldier, and then you get the Jem'Hadar Vanguard, which has that improved trait.
And the trait is the Shroud?
No, the improved trait is you get a buff with combat abilities, but with the Vanguard, it also applies to space combat, not just ground.
Oh, I see. So it's probably fair to say that they are geared towards being primarily tactical characters, right?
You can also play as engineer or science characters as well. Like, it applies to everyone. Like,
well, I mean, I said, and I still mean it, that I don't want to make a character in that faction until and unless they add Vorta, because I don't really have any interest in playing a Jem'Hadar. But a Vorta seems a little more nuanced and interesting and into intrigue and stuff like that. The Jem'Hadar are pretty straightforward. I'm gonna kick your ass, motherfucker, that kind of thing, right?
like the basic warrior, like.
Right. Whereas the Vorta are a little more scheming and seem a little more interesting to me.
I know, but of course, I'd maybe at least make a character just to to get the account unlocked for Gamma recruitment. Like see there, you can get an additional like account unlock buff with Gamma recruits. So at least maybe make a Jemadar for that. So
I don't know, man. I don't know. I mean, I've got 5. I think I've got 5 Delta recruits now. I just made a new one when they did the Delta recruit again, and because I was waiting for another event like that. You know, I mean, they did it with the temporal agent thing, right? But you had to be Federation for that. And at the time, I mean, I made a temporal agent, right? But that threw off my balance so that I had 3 Federation characters and 2 Klingon characters and what, 6 wait a minute, do I have, yeah, and 6 Romulan characters. But so now I have 3 Feds and 3 Klingon. I had recently had you know, after the temporal agent event, or temporal recruit event, I had bought the option to have a player character that was a joined Trill, and my plan was that I was going to basically make a clone of Jadzia Dax, not actually her, but a character who looked like her as much as I could accomplish anyway, and kind of give her a similar name. So I have Jenzia Lex or something like that. I forget exactly what her first name was. I think it was Jenzia, and then the last name was Lex. And I made her look as much like Jadzia Dax as I could, but I don't want her to be Jadzia Dax. I just want her to have that same kind of cat-like appearance and you know, that kind of stuff. So I made her as a Delta recruit quite recently, and she's still relatively low level. I've got to do something with her, get her on up. But yeah, I had to restore the balance, right? Got to be a good Deferi, huh?
Restore the balance. Like I wonder if they're going to make the Deferi playable, or they're just going to like maybe just put them on the side, like they've been recently doing. Like, but you know, like, but as I said, like you seen like what if you have like one of these like recruitment event characters, you can get like you can actually get rewards for all your characters, like extra dilithium and marks, so you can just unlock for all your characters. So it's probably good to have like whenever there's a.
They did that with temporal recruit and Delta recruit as well. So there's still that.
Anyhow, but I'm just saying, like, it's if you want, like, see, like, it's probably a good idea that whenever you want to get like most of the rewards, it's pretty good to make at least one character whenever there's a recruitment event, a new different recruitment event come.
I mean, I would, but they don't let me play a Vorta. I don't want to play a Vorta. I don't want to play a Jem'Hadar. I'm sorry, I just don't want to play them. I don't find them interesting. I don't find them, you know, I mean, it'd be like, I wouldn't play a Cardassian either. I just don't find them interesting. They don't appeal to me. But, you know, I've thought for a while that they should have, if they were going to add a new kind of faction, I've thought they should add Ferengi. Because, you know, in Deep Space Nine, there was quite a bit of exploration of Ferengi culture and their homeworld and stuff like that. So you got to a lot of, I mean, we talked about this before, I think, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of material that's already there to work with to make a Ferengi faction, and a lot of players have asked for some kind of faction that is not a military faction, you know, some kind of a mercenary faction or a faction of traders. And what the species in Star Trek universe, which is well known as a trading faction, is the Ferengi. They are I mean, the original concept of them from the first appearance in The Next Generation, I forget the name of the episode, but it was the one where they met the portal from the Takan Empire. They were described as similar to Yankee traders from Earth's North American history, which were like the worst kind of capitalists.
Yeah, like I think also mentioned that originally they're going to be like the major antagonists in The Next Generation until they decide to abandon that and go to the board.
Yeah. Well, so you have done all of the new missions now, is that right?
Yep. I've done like all the new missions, and of course they're quite well done compared to like all the past missions. And there's and there and also they kind of like foreshadow like a lot of stuff that they're planning that they seem to be planning for future stories. Like,
yeah, I mean, I haven't played them all yet, so I can't really give an informed opinion about how well they were done. What I've played so far, I've liked, but I've thought that the Republic, Romulan Republic, tutorial stories were the best missions in the game so far.
Yeah, they're pretty good because like pretty much like because Cryptic was able to just create them from scratch instead of trying to work in with what they already created before. But actually, you did mention you played Armistice. Like, see, like with the revelation of them finding a new orb, kind of like foreshadowed like some kind of plot involving the prophets and maybe in the Parace. Like,
and maybe we'll see some more Mirror Universe stuff too. I mean, there's certainly that stuff going on in connection with the prophets and the orbs and so forth. We've seen that before.
Yes, and of course, actually, I think you might have seen it like in the smaller sections of the fleet Discord, but actually, like there was actually this leak that they say they plan to have more Discovery tie-ins, and then like when after thinking about it, like, well, I don't want to spoil much into, but there was actually this scene in an episode of Discovery that, in hindsight, kind of reminded me a lot of like a prophet vision, which got me thinking, like, could those things actually be connected?
Which thing did you? What thing from Discovery was that?
I don't want to spoil it for you, but there was actually a scene when, like, you probably had to see where Stamets was trapped in the trapped in the mycelium network. You probably heard like from other spoilers, right? Like, and then he got and you probably heard those spoilers already, so you don't mind if I say it?
No, go ahead.
Oh yeah, because like Lieutenant Stamets, he was trapped in the mycelial network with his mirror self, and of course he's being guided by what appears to be his dead lover. Like, see, I'm just thinking, like, okay, so he's in some kind of like area that is in subspace. I'm presuming that that's what their cell network is, like subspace, and he's being guided by a benevolent force that took the form of someone he's familiar with.
Right. We certainly have seen that with encounters with the prophets. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, like, are they like, see, like, and of course, at least saying that they're playing more Discovery tie-ins, like, are they going to like say that those events are related? Like, are we going to actually explore like the more of the nature of the prophets?
That could be interesting.
Yes, like, so I think that's probably a good way to continue the DS9 theme, as well as tying into Discovery. And course, I kind of realized, like, see, the first season of Discovery, I can see a lot of similar elements to Deep Space Nine's, and maybe that wasn't really a coincidence, but there was intentionally, like, they're taking stuff from Deep Space Nine and putting them into Discovery.
Yeah, that could be. And so, I mean, I don't know. Do you think that the how many episodes are there now? The new episodes, they're what, 8?
Yeah, I think that's about 8, around 8. Yeah.
So do you think that that will be all the missions we get for that? Because I mean, I don't. I mean, surely they will add more missions that follow on after the last one that's available at the moment. I mean, they usually do, like, every season they'll do a certain number of episodes in that season, and then it'll be like season 8, and then they'll come out a few months later with season 8.5, and it kind of is the same stuff, but more missions, right?
Actually, they kind of say that they are going. Basically, they're going to say they are directly continuing the storyline from the last mission, because, like, at the end it says to be continued.
Oh,
like,
cool.
Once you finish the mission, it actually said to be continued, like, in sort of like in a similar font to, like, classic 2-part Star Trek series, like.
Right. Okay, so that's cool. I was kind of hoping for that, because, I mean, 8 missions doesn't seem like a lot for a new expansion and a new season. I mean, for a while now, we've had seasons that were like 1 or 2 episodes, and I'm like, what the fuck? This is not a fucking season, What happened to the old days when we used to get like 12 missions in a season, and now it's like we get 1 or 2? No, that's not a season.
Like, I think they're just trying to, like, I think they're kind of lazy and just trying to, like, concentrate more on one mission than.
Well, it may, be more focus on one mission, so I don't know that you would call that lazy, but I mean, I do have my own issues with them and what I would consider laziness. Like, I've bitched about the interior from the lay set several times. Why didn't they give us the interior for our dreadnought warbirds? Right? Because at the moment, all you've got is the Scimitar Bridge and the Singularity, what is it? A Thalaron generator room. You don't have. You don't have an interior. You don't have a club, and you don't have a crew deck with captain's quarters and commander's quarters, whatever. You don't have an engineering deck. None of that stuff is there. It's just the bridge and the Thalaron generator room.
Liviana, to use the washroom. Be right back.
You know what? I'm going to go ahead and call it a stream, because I'm going to have to do likewise, and I don't want to leave the stream with dead air. So thanks for joining me, and I will see you later.
Have a good night.
You too. Okay, people, if anyone is still watching, or anyone is watching this later, this has been From the Grassy Knoll, a production of Republic News, and with your hostess, Liviana. And I am Liviana, or at least that's the name I use here. So, and if you've listened to this stream, you know where I got the name. For Republic News, this is Liviana signing off. Until next time, have fun, but stay safe.